He's got one foot in the frying pan and one in the pressure cooker. Believe me, as a bowler, I know that right about now, your bladder feels like an overstuffed vacuum cleaner bag, and your butt is kind of like an about to explode bratwurst.
Hey, do you mind? I wasn't talking when you were bowling.
Was I talking out loud?
Welcome to Munsons at the Movies. My name is Kyle. I will once again be your host. Joined by the rest of the Munsons. Want to give them a wide berth.
Is what is called a born loser. A real Munson.
And talk a little bit about what's going on in their worlds. This time we would start with James, but he had to back out at the last second because he had apparently a house full of humans show up a day early. In lieu of the fact that he did a lot of David Arquette research, you will still hear from him periodically in post during this episode, but he will not be here. So if he tries to tell you that he was here for the full conversation, just stayed quiet the whole time, he's a liar. He's not that quiet.
Isn't this like 2 of the last 3 that someone backed out last minute?
Yes.
Something's happening. Right
Yes.
now. We got to watch all these David Arquette movies, and now all of a sudden James can't make it. No, I got it. I see what's happening here.
He's living the bad plot from a Christmas movie right now. That's what's going on with James's situation.
My only response to that is one word. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Well played, James. I respect it.
Case, what about you?
Last week, I had an experience that made me think of you guys. I was at an open mic comedy show. I don't think these people realized that they were up for 5 minutes because they only had about 2 minutes of material. And I was the subject of a couple different crowd work segments that was very flattering. I was asked to be congratulated and welcomed by the crowd because the guy thought I was Dana White. The next time a guy was doing crowd work, he looked at me and he said, "Hey, man, when is the next Fast and Furious coming out?" He's like, "Ladies and gentlemen, we got one of the producers from Fast and the Furious." And I just said, "It's all about family."
Oh, no.
Nothing. I'm like, come on, you guys. How do we not know that?
Okay, sometimes you sit a little too close to the front, and this is what you invite into your life when you go to a comedy show, and this is part of the experience.
Well, the best students sit in the first 3 rows of the classroom, so, you know me, I'm an overachiever.
That's right.
I go for it.
It's not always true.
I'm sure your shining, shimmering bald head did not attract any attention in the front of that room either.
No.
Never.
Not at all.
Aubrey, how about you?
I'm living the absolute dream. I've done nothing. I don't even know how many days in a row now, other than coach basketball for summer league stuff. I'm currently eating a crumble cookie. I've watched movies pretty much nonstop and played golf. My life is a dream. Everything is perfect. I've got nothing to complain about.
Hey, in summer league, you're not even going to break a clipboard.
I'll take stats.
You'll probably only drink water the whole time.
We have a kid who's getting D1 offers. I just watch him be great. That's what I get to do.
I mean, I'm happy for you. I really am. In my world, I want to talk to you guys about consistency. Okay. And that is my 35 and up baseball league started. And I've been coming in to do some cleanup on the back end as a pitcher. And I am proud to say that I have given up at least a 3-run home run in both of my relief appearances. Lots of ground ball outs otherwise, but man, am I giving up homers.
Humble flex right there, buddy. I love it.
It was.
I just give up homers. No big deal.
From a coaching standpoint, I feel like if I know what you're going to give me, we can prepare.
Yep.
So to me, this is a positive. This consistency is great.
It can only go up from here. Outside of some of those things that we report back, very excited to welcome back one of our favorite guests, Sam Phillips. He's a degenerate friend of Warren's who took a semester of film classes at A&M and thinks he's an expert on movies, as one would.
He's a bigger expert than we are, that's for sure.
Those are qualifications.
Yes.
His favorite movie is Mean Streets. His second favorite, we learned, is The Cat in the Hat. He was previously here for the Dakota Fanning and Zooey Deschanel episodes, and we made some magic work. I know he's not feeling great today, but he's here. He's ready to participate, and we're excited to have him back. How's it going, Sam?
I'm here. I'm a Munson. So, we're better to be. We're better to be.
That Cat in the Hat review might be in the Mount Rushmore of reviews.
Yeah, I was still kind of feeling things out, but, I kind of dialed it up a little bit. I think I've since become a bit more tame as a father. So,
Ooh, we have mature gentlemen on the show tonight.
I may be a bit more mature than before, although the subject matter, y'all really teed me up for that one. So
that's true. Hey, man, we know you're going to bring the funny. You're going to bring the informative, and we're just excited to talk a little bit of David Arquette with you.
That is just Too kind of you.
High bar. High bar.
Glad to be here.
I know. All right, let's rock and roll. Birthdays, July 4th. This episode's dropping on Independence Day, y'all. It's kind of fun. Happy 4th for those listening, for wherever you're at. All right, so birthdays. I got 3 of them for you today on the 4th of July. First and foremost, we got Melissa Barrera, probably most known for her roles in the Scream films, no longer long-lived.
Yeah, being fired from them.
I really liked her in that role, too. It's disappointing.
In The Heights, Abigail, and some foreign language films earlier in her career. How old is Melissa Barrera?
I'm going to say she's 29.
That's a really good guess. Oh,
Well, James isn't here, so I have to do the honest guessing this time.
That's true.
31?
I'll go with 28.
You are all very, very kind humans because Melissa is turning 34, so Aubrey will take that one.
Your math is off. There's no way she's in her mid-30s.
She's turning 34. I don't know what you want from me.
Double whammy. I got it right and I was low.
All right, next up we have Tracy Letts. Really good actor. I mean, he's in a lot, but like Lady Bird, Ford v Ferrari, The Post, Little Women. Somehow old is Tracy Letts is an immediate add to your picture.
Because I loved Ford versus Ferrari. I'm going to go 60.
I think it's higher than that. 66.
I'll say 65. Like, he's just now getting those discounts.
One of you is a winner. Tracy Letts is turning 60. Case at 60 on the dot, right?
I got one right.
You did. On the dot, too.
This guessing for real is not as much fun, but it feels better.
I was a little disheveled because I was doing some quick research to make sure that our last birthday was alive, and she is. She's the oldest living Academy Award winner still around, and that's Ava Marie Saint, known for roles like On the Waterfront, North by Northwest, Superman Returns, Winter's Tale, and one episode of Frasier. How old is Ava Marie Saint? She is old. I'll tell you that.
I don't like your tone.
I don't either.
30.
30. I'm going to take a page out of Sam's book. I think she's also just now starting enjoying the benefits. 65.
Okay.
I wasn't sure what that picture was that you posted. It looks like a picture of one of those movie stars that died way too young from heroin when they were like 25 or something. I'm going to go 96.
You guys kind of set it up as a softball for Sam on that one by going 30 and 65. Ava's turning 100 on the 4th of July. Shout out to her. She's hitting the century mark. So Sam will take that one. Everybody gets a win today.
All right.
She probably played like the oldest person on the planet in her episode of Frasier 30 years ago. And she's still, hey, God bless her. I'm happy for her.
Yep.
I don't celebrate actors' birthdays. 4th of July, I got some fireworks for you.
Well, happy birthday to them and everybody else. Episode 103. Holy moly, that is a mouthful. We had 5 actors we threw onto the wheel. That included Timothy Spall, Alfred Molina, Tim Blake Nelson, Kareena Kapoor, but it doesn't matter because the wheel selected David Arquette. David's got 146 credits on his resume, including 26 producer credits. So I guess that's actually not including. Added to that 26 producer credits where it could have overlapped with a role, and also has directed 7 different projects in his career. So he's done a little. I'm not going to say as much as some other actors we've covered, but he's done some things off screen. Mm-hmm. But before we get into the minutia and talk about the roles and discuss the things that we liked and we didn't like and anything in between, we always start with a little actor trivia. And since James decided not to be here for this portion, he gave Aubrey that responsibility. So we're going to see if he can stump us with a little trivia, Fast and Furious style.
I'll start this as I've started many a class. Everyone lower your standards. I'm significantly less prepared than you think I am. So the way that this goes is I'm going to give you 3 facts, and you guys are going to choose which one is not a fact about David Arquette, but is in fact a fact about one of the illustrious members of the Fast and Furious cast. I feel like I did that right. So here are the 3.
Fact 2. I'm going to treat you like a substitute teacher, Aubrey. Fact 2.
What's so funny is you did that, and I just got so reflectively mad.
It triggered the man.
I was just about to be, what the freak is wrong with you? It's not at all what I said. Anyways, oh my God. Anyways, fact number 1. Wrestled Jeff Jarrett for the WWE Intercontinental Championship belt, but the match was interrupted by Stone Cold Steve Austin before he could pin Jarrett and win the title. Fact 2. He almost died in a wrestling match when a fluorescent light bulb accidentally slit his throat, but survived after being rushed to the hospital by actor Luke Perry. And number 3, owns the rights to and currently acts as the nearly 80-year-old character Bozo the Clown.
I'm going number 2.
And because James has left me with this and I'm still very nervous, I'm going to pretend like I came up with all these facts. It was very hard for me to find these.
Those are good facts, Aubrey.
Thanks.
I'm going to go on a limb and say that it's fact 1. And I'm going to say Aubrey/James is trying to get us to say that's The Rock. But I'm actually going to say that it's his co-star from Ready to Rumble, Scott Conn. I heard David Arquette in an interview say that Scott Conn could probably beat up everybody in Hollywood and would beat up most professional wrestlers. So I'm going to go Scott Conn.
Was Tweeter in Fast and Furious?
Oh, wait, no.
Wow.
You're right. I think it's Scott Eastwood, not Scott Conn.
That's right.
Either way, hey, I'm sticking to my guns. Scott Conn, fact 1.
When you prep for David Arquette, you watch You Cannot Kill David Arquette. So I know this man's a WCW human. So I'm going to go with fact 1 is also, this could be The Rock or John Cena, right? Because both of them were in that world, both Fast and Furious. But I'm just going to say it was Ludacris. I think Ludacris had a wrestling stint. Christopher Bridges. Why not?
You don't say it's Ludacris. Ludacris says it's ludicrous.
That's right.
It also goes into how old you think Jeff Jarrett is, if you know who Jeff Jarrett is.
Mm-hmm.
I got no idea who Jeff Jarrett is.
That guy's been wrestling for quite some time.
Yeah.
Well, no one selected fact 3. Owns the rights to and currently acts as the nearly 80-year-old character Bozo the Clown. That is true. Bozo the Clown was created in the 1940s and was franchised regionally by local TV stations. As a huge fan of Bozo growing up, Arquette was an aspiring clown before the acting bug bit him. In 2021, had outright purchased the rights to Bozo the Clown. Due to an actual interest in the legacy of the character, the love for Bozo he had from a young age, but also hoping to rehabilitate how people think about clowns. It's an insane fact.
Yeah, it's par for the course for this guy.
It's something I'll reference later when we talk about You Cannot Kill David Arquette. Fact 2, which I think only Sam picked, he almost died in a wrestling match when a fluorescent light bulb accidentally slit his throat, but survived after being rushed to the hospital by actor Luke Perry, which sounds like a made-up fact.
Mm-hmm.
Just the writing on this was incredible. I'm patting myself on the back because I wrote this, obviously. This is true. Arquette faced off against an ex-con, Nick Gage, which is true. He did actually go to jail, in a death match, which is the most hardcore style where wrestlers kind of use whatever. This is like barbed wire ropes, thumbtacks, fire, and in this case, a fluorescent light bulb. The match turned gruesome when Gage smashed the fluorescent light tube over Arquette's head, which then accidentally slit his throat. Arquette finished the match and then was rushed to the hospital by a longtime friend and fellow actor Luke Perry, whose son is also a professional wrestler. Which this is in the documentary You Cannot Kill David Arquette, which you can see when it happens. This is like what they call like breaking kayfabe. Like he actually starts like figuring out what he wants to do.
Yeah.
There's like a real rush of panic. There was like real kind of movements and actions that were not wrestling anymore.
It's scary to watch.
Yeah.
It's also why when the WWE runs those things right before the thing, or right before their shows, when they're like, do not do these stunts at home. This is why. Because people do this stuff and almost kill themselves. Fact 1 is not true. He wrestled Jeff Jarrett for the WWE Intercontinental Championship belt, but the match was interrupted by Stone Cold Steve Austin before he could pin Jarrett to win the title. David Arquette has a professional wrestling record of 12-10, including having successfully pinned Jeff Jarrett to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, and defended the title once before, eventually losing it to Jeff Jarrett in a steel cage match. However, he never wrestled Jeff Jarrett for the Intercontinental Championship. That match included Fast and Furious star Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
There you go.
Dang it.
Who, despite being a 17-time WWE champion and hold a record for 303 wins and 199 losses, which no one cares about in wrestling, just for the record, he never beat Jeff Jarrett, unlike David Arquette, who had.
There you go.
So if The Rock's listening, I didn't write that one. Or it throws a little bit of shade on The Rock at the end. I didn't write that one. I wrote the other ones.
Yeah, something tells me The Rock's not all that threatened professionally or personally by David Arquette.
Both heavyweight champions? I don't know.
That's true.
Both star in successful franchises?
Fair.
Both stunning physiques?
Mm.
All right, now you're just getting out of hand. Let's relax now. Aubrey, good job creating those out of thin air with no help from James or ChatGPT. I'm proud of you.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
All right, Case, I know since the last time we recorded, you and I have done some major updates to our box office spreadsheet. We got a mega list now of how many movies are on that list?
As of the time of recording, we now have 2,805 movies that we are pulling data from. I don't think it's going to shock anybody in this podcast that he is going to struggle in our box office snapshot. Specifically to his performance, he's been in an abnormally large amount of movies that have lost money. He has 11 movies at least that have lost over $1 million. And I say at least because I have nearly 50 movies on my spreadsheet and only 22 of them include box office information. So what that means is half the movies that I have box office information on, they have lost $1 million at least. Home runs clearly are going to be involved in his involvement in the 5 Screen movies. Also, he did well with Adventures in Shark Boy and Lava Girl, Eight-Legged Freaks, which we'll talk about later, and Never Been Kissed as his high points. Of that grouping, Never Been Kissed is his highest, partnering with Drew Barrymore, going for an $85 million world gross against a $25 million budget. Going into the numbers. Now, I'm going to say this. I like David Arquette. So I just want that on the front end of this roller coaster. I think he and his sisters are fascinating, and I think they're talented, and I think they're fun. But he's ranked 97th in average budget out of 103, 97th in world gross, 98th at Star Meter, oddly 88 in critic ranking, 91 in fan ranking, 75-45 in the 2 different box office metrics. I want to congratulate him for being in the top 100. He comes in at 96, with Chris Rock just ahead of him at 95 and F. Murray Abraham just behind him at 97.
Higher than I thought. I thought we were talking about a new bottom of the barrel.
Scream saved him big time but Scream is like 3 or 4 of them are like in our top 100 films. So those ones have helped him a lot. He really does try to do an even amount of indie projects with blockbuster films, and I've appreciated that in his approach to building a filmography, but it doesn't necessarily help him in our comparative world.
Yeah, I'm not shocked by this at all. I felt like it was going lower, but it's impossible to be the lowest. He's not just in Scream, he's like a major part of that movie.
Yeah.
That franchise. So like
well, and Kyle, to respond to you, I mean, I don't know how much lower he could have gone. He only had 7 spots.
Hey, 7 spots is a lot.
If not for the Scream movies, he's basically Tommy Wiseau's buddy in The Room. I mean, he's got
He's Greg Sestero. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, he's Sestero.
That's high praise.
Point still stands. All right, so that's a good starting point, Case. 96 out of 103. We'll see what that Munson meter looks like on the back end. Appreciate you guys.
You bet.
Early days. Again, James isn't here in physical sense, but in spirit, in post. He might show up peppering in some really interesting stuff. But David was born in Bentonville, Virginia, 1971. As Case alluded to, all 4 of his siblings are actors. Rosanna, Richmond, Patricia, and Alexis were actors at one point in time. The family itself, all the kids, really got into the performing arts. And they're pretty famous. Obviously, I'd say Patricia is probably the one who is the most successful out of the siblings as an actress. But David's no slouch either. I mean, he's got a lot of pop culture, which we'll get into. But
yeah, Patricia's probably the most accomplished.
She is.
Rosanna's pretty good too, and pop culture standpoint, he's probably 2. I mean, and they just had a wild childhood, man.
When we say pop culture standpoint, who are the people who know who Patricia Arquette is?
I think David's got the most pop culture impact of all of them, for sure.
No, you're right.
I don't say that to be disrespectful. I just think like movie people know who she is.
That's correct.
But like she doesn't have anything as big as like Scream.
No.
People that watch Little Nicky know her. I mean, like they're, well, what?
So those 15 people. Who else?
Yeah. Boyhood.
Other than True Romance, which was before most of our generation's time, she's not pop culture type. No.
That's true.
No,
That's
not at
true.
all.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even after like a recent Oscar win.
Right.
Like, it's just, I just don't feel like people would recognize her the way that they would him.
Yeah, that's a good point. He was in the audience at one of Andre the Giant's championship matches. That was exciting. But he brings up like, hey, like I loved watching wrestling with my dad, and this is a emotional point for me. And
well, who did his dad voice in the Hulk Hogan animated series? Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah, Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Yeah, Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah, so that's really what like got him into it.
You could just tell that he had a very close relationship with his parents, and they move to like a commune or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He had a very different upbringing than a lot of the people we've ever looked at from both an education standpoint and a socialization standpoint. It makes sense how he grew up, that he's going to handle situations like this. And so it was really fun learning a lot about him and then putting the front end of that story together, having never known those things before.
No, that's a good point, Case. I thought a lot about that documentary, which we'll talk about later, but I thought a lot about that, him, and some of the stuff he says in that. And I didn't think about the point that you just brought up, how much his upbringing affects how he's responding to a lot of these things, which I just think is a really good thing, especially the layout on the front end. Mm-hmm. I also want to say for the record that I like David Arquette.
Me too.
Because it might get ugly here in a minute.
He's made a living off of some of the less educated viewers out there. But hey, I mean, you know.
Hey, a living's a living, man. Do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Guilty as charged.
He's got more in his account than me.
That's right. And we all know who he is.
Correct.
Let's talk about the early days then. His first big role, not on film, but on TV, was as Keith Two-Bit Matthews in 13 episodes of The Outsider Show, which I believe got canceled after one season in 1990. Leo DiCaprio was supposed to be on the show too, and I don't know if he didn't get cast or the character was cut. I don't know. But I don't know what led him to that role.
That show would be significantly more easily made now with how much production investment studios and streaming services put into TV shows. Back then, when they were trying to launch this, TV was like, that's where people's careers went to die. Like all they were trying to do was get movies back then.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so you know that story wasn't being invested in because that was such an iconic film.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of seemed doomed to fail, just with the landscape.
Failure to launch, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that makes sense because he also did 12 episodes of Parenthood in 1990, 1991. So he started on the TV side. Good job. But at least the recurring roles. I mean, a lot of actors we cover, they just do one episode here, one episode here, one episode here. You got some recurring roles out the gate, which is, that says something. And then he took his talents to the big screen to what we're going to call his first major role, which is his role as Benny in Buffy the Vampire Slayer from 1992. And Aubrey takes the honor of doing this review.
This is the one I've been waiting for.
I want to share my personal response to getting this review. Upon receiving the assignment, I was very excited. Because I got a lot of time. I could watch probably a good portion of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've only seen bits and pieces. It's like an iconic show. I'm like, all right, like let's do this. I was gearing up for it. And then I quickly realized shortly after that it was the movie that I had completely forgotten existed and immediately got depressed. This is the 1992 movie written by Joss Whedon and directed by someone who I cannot pronounce his name. And I don't know who he is, so I don't want to butcher his name. But the most notable thing to me is that Joss Whedon wrote this because I became very surprised that Joss Whedon wrote this as I was watching it. But essentially, a flighty teenage girl named Buffy Summers, learns that she is her generation's destined battler of vampires. And the person who informs her of this destiny is none other than Donald Sutherland.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace for sure. It was awesome to see him because I was kind of in the mood to want to watch Donald Sutherland movies anyways. And essentially you just watch this girl who is kind of a typical, or at least a glamorized version of a typical high school girl, become a vampire slayer and save her school and town from vampires. It's like a horror comedy.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this is really more classified as like a B horror. That's what it feels like to me. Now, at the time, 1992, maybe it was less B horror and more straight up like satire, like dark comedy. But it feels like a B movie now. I didn't really enjoy it, but I was trying to find where the value in something like this was at, because maybe in 1992 this was really funny. It seemed intentionally bad. And the humor is that these things are weird. You have characters that are dying and they're like dragging out the death in like a weird comedic fashion. The lines are like the jokes are odd. I don't know exactly who we're serving with this, but I can see this becoming like a B horror cult thing. It made me want to watch the TV show even more because of how regarded the TV show is. Because I do think the idea is interesting. This girl who has no idea that she is essentially this great hero is like a sci-fi trope, but it's usually never a girl. So the real benefit to this, to me, is like how forward it was. This was very like female forward. She was never presented as weak. She's saving Luke Perry, who is the guy that she eventually falls for. So in that part, it's valuable. David Arquette, he plays the person you would think he would play early in his career. He plays it exactly as you are thinking right now. That is exactly what he's doing. And then he becomes a vampire. He leaves the movie for about 50 minutes of the 85.
Good chunk.
And comes back as the exact character you would picture him to be as a vampire at that time. If you told me that he was in this movie and what he was doing, he does exactly what I thought he would do. It's not necessarily bad. It's not any worse than anything else that's happening. It's just odd, which I feel like I'm going to end up saying a lot. Some of the choices are odd. Some of the things he's doing are odd. And it didn't ultimately work a ton for me.
Aubrey, I didn't rewatch this for this episode. Were they going for a Teen Wolf formula? Charming main character, and then you're like the quirky sidekick. And is that what David Arquette was doing? Was the Styles role of being a quirky sidekick?
He's like the sidekick to the sidekick.
Yeah,
he's Luke Perry's friend, and Luke Perry is essentially the sidekick to Buffy.
Okay.
Major role might be a stretch here, but this is worth noting considering what this movie became with the TV show.
It's a recognizable thing that he's doing.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
He's not in a ton, but he's in enough of it for it to be notable.
Who would have known that this movie would have saved his life? Because I'm sure that's when him and Luke Perry became best friends. Luke Perry saved his life at that wrestling match.
He did.
There you go.
I'd love to hear the conversations those two have about this movie.
Luke Perry passed away, right? He passed away in like 2020 or whatever.
Yeah.
So rest in peace to him too.
Yep.
Interesting way to start though. Popcorn movie, campy horror, side character, not necessarily a major role, but an interesting start.
If you like B horror,
I think it's worth checking out.
If you like Sharknado and stuff like that, then watch this movie. It works just fine on that front.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for something serious, do not watch this movie.
After that, 92, he does an episode of Beverly Hills 90210. I feel like that's like a rite of passage there in the early 90s. So you get on Beverly Hills 90210, that's like being on SVU if you're living in New York, you know what I mean? Like that's a big deal probably at that time.
He's ascending. Like he is rising in like popularity and like, does this guy have what it takes to be a leading man? And it's crazy to think back, knowing what we know about David Arquette now, that's where he was during the 90s.
It sounds funny when he says that. It almost sounds like you're being sarcastic. But depending what he does in that episode of 90210, you're 100% right. Like, that's a big get. Like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on what he's asked to do in there, it's not just like, oh, I carried like drinks to a table. Like, that show was massive. 94,
he did a movie called Road Racers. When they talked about in the documentary some of his like earlier roles that he played, this is one that they isolated, and I just don't know if I didn't get a chance to see it. I wish I would have had, because he looks like a badass in his like leather jacket in the video still. I think an indie film right around that time that he got himself involved in.
I love his character's name.
Dude. Just Dude from Road Racers. Just Dude.
David, this is a studio. We'd like to offer you the role as Dude. All right, I'm in.
Or he's in a movie that I really enjoy, Airheads. He plays Carter, who's like the bleach blonde stoner guy who's like in the radio station with them. It's a small side character, but I remember him sticking out when I watched Airheads for the Buscemi episode.
Didn't he have like a joke that was popular?
So it's like a not take him seriously stoner mid-90s role, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Nothing big, but a movie that had a lot of big actors at the time, and Sandler and Fraser and Buscemi and those guys. And that's going to lead us to what we called his largest critic gap, which is Wild Bill. His actual largest critic gap is a movie that you cannot find anywhere, and I didn't go the rod maker route and order it for $37 on Amazon from Bulgaria. The Alarmist with Stanley Tucci is not streamable anywhere. So the next best option for him is the movie Wild Bill.
Your lack of commitment is appalling.
We pick good guests. Right, Sam?
Yeah, and Wild Bill was not a great movie, and
No.
I had never seen it, but I'll tell you this: I love Jeff Bridges.
Same.
And I love the show Deadwood, and to know that David Arquette's the guy that's gonna kill Jeff Bridges, and then you ultimately watch him do it, get someone else to do it. It's Wild Bill.
That's a great segue to this, Sam, because I think everybody kind of knows this story of Wild Bill Hickok, and David Arquette plays James Bacall, the person who puts a bullet in his head at a poker table.
Right.
At the end of the story, I see the lineup, I see the list of actors in this movie, I get interested, and then I see the scores on Rotten Tomatoes where it's a 46-27 split, and even though it's critic gap, neither critics or audiences enjoyed it. But I see Jeff Bridges, I see Ellen Barkin, I see John Hurt, Diane Lane, Christina Applegate, Bruce Dern, James Remar, James Gammon, Stoney Jackson, the guy who played Ray Mitchell in Angels in the Outfield. Just a little fun fact for you all. That shouldn't mean anything to anybody who's not an Angels in the Outfield fan, but hey, here we are. And then David Arquette, and I'm like, that's a pretty good cast. That's a solid cast for a flick in the mid-90s about a well-known story. But the thing that threw me off the most about it, and Sam, you'll probably agree with this, is they take that stylistic approach where they do flashbacks and even flash forwards in black and white, and they always tilt the camera. And if you do it once, I'm good with it. But they do it like 7 times. And it's a storytelling device that they use, and it's very disorienting, and it just looks low budget every time they do it in the film. And so I think it just like cuts its legs out underneath it with that choice. I don't know if you felt the same.
Yeah, I think there was probably a pressure to do it with like Unforgiven and Tombstone and Wyatt Earp and a bunch of those movies. So they said, we'll throw our hats in too. But yeah, stylistically, it was a bad movie. And I think at least a third of those critics put a thumbs down as soon as David Arquette pulled the trigger.
$30 million budget. They made $2 million. So massive bomb in Case's box office spreadsheet. He shows up at the 26-minute mark in the film. And I'm thinking, because I had just watched Buffy, that I didn't really look into which character he was playing. I was thinking David Arquette's going to play like a side character. It's like a year after Airheads. Nah, he's pretty important to the story.
Right.
I had to ask myself, is the movie bad because David Arquette plays such a crucial role?
No.
It didn't help it, having David Arquette in that role.
No, it didn't help.
He's not the main reason it's a bad movie, but it doesn't help it by any stretch of the imagination.
If you look at the comparison, and I can't think of the actor's name offhand, from Deadwood and his performance, like leading up to killing Wild Bill, like that guy was so good. And I believe he played 2 parts in Deadwood. But yeah, when you put those two up next to each other, there's not even a comparison.
Yep. So if I have to say, Kyle, where do you stand in the critic gap here? 46-27. I guess I got to go close to the audience this year. I'd probably like a 30. I don't think it's not one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but it's not one I would recommend to anybody unless you want to see how much better of an actor Jeff Bridges is comparatively to David Arquette. I mean, not that he's great in the film necessarily, but like he just commands so much more presence.
Yeah.
David Arquette, like in the first scene, he's supposed to come off as pretty serious, and like it just comes off as a goofball. And it kills the momentum at that moment in the film because it's just a bad cast.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if he could do that now. That sounds shitty for me to say that. Post-Scream films, I think he's got a little bit of a dramatic bone in his body, but definitely not in 95 or 94 when they filmed this. That's my synopsis on Wild Bill.
I watched The Cottage, where he was supposed to be the bad guy. It's not in his heart to be the villain.
Did you watch Happy Face Killer? Because I watched 30 minutes of that and I gave up on that because he's the killer in that one. Shocking.
This Jack McCall character is so nefarious that they still do reenactments of the killing of Wild Bill and the hanging of Jack McCall in Deadwood.
Mm-hmm.
That character needed to be bigger. And Sam's right. This is hot Western time in Hollywood, and everybody was trying to capitalize on it.
Yeah, lost 28 million.
Westerns don't need to be stylized. Like, I haven't seen this movie, but I love Westerns. Like, I grew up watching Westerns with my dad. Like, I love Westerns. And the simplicity of Westerns, the straightforwardness of how they're shot is purposeful for how you're supposed to enjoy the movie and experience the film and the setting. So stylized Westerns are always interesting for me. But you made a good point, Kyle, an interesting point about his presence or lack thereof in comparison to another performer, which I thought about in reference to another movie that may surprise all of you. That is a tease.
I love it. We love a good tease.
Let's go.
I still feel like this probably was better than The Alarmist that I couldn't find, but neither here nor there. We'll never know because I'm not getting any DVDs from Bulgaria anytime soon. Sorry about it. All right, so here's the crazy part about we do feature reviews, or we do 5 of them. We don't have another one until 2019. So we're about to cover 33 years of his career. No, 23. Math is hard sometimes. So we're going to cover everything from 96 to 2019. We're going to see some interesting phases of his career. So the next movie he's in, 96, Beautiful Girls, a movie we talked about a few times on the Matt Dillon and Natalie Portman episodes. Case and I watch this. It's a Timothy Hutton star production, and Arquette plays Bobby, his brother, in the film. Again, another side character, not a huge role, but a movie that's like, Natalie Portman's just like the most endearing character ever, and Matt Dillon is a sleazeball in there. And it's just kind of creepy because Timothy Hutton's like getting hit on by Natalie Portman, and it's kind of weird.
Fact.
I'm not going to say it's a bad movie. I enjoyed the film, but it just keeps coming up in the Munson verse over here. Beautiful Girls.
You want me to add the most significant pop culture?
The Con Air. Yeah.
No, them singing Sweet Caroline at Fenway Park at Boston games came from this.
So you're saying that's more significant than him wanted someone to buy Con Air, so he wrote this while he was waiting for someone to purchase the screenplay for Con Air?
Yeah, the same guy that wrote Con Air wrote this movie. It's unbelievably hilarious.
And then a film in 96 that I wish I would have been able to see. Again, one you can't find anywhere, and it's called John's. And it's a role that his sister mentioned of like he had these complex roles when he was younger. And now that's, some of that sibling solidarity. But it's a film that I was looking at some reviews and seemed to be well reviewed. Indie film. He plays a role with some you can't find it anywhere. It's not available anywhere. That doesn't help. I would like to watch John's, but you can't find it anywhere. Like, it feels like that movie might have been the version of David Arquette we could have gotten if he hadn't gone some different routes. I don't know.
So his character is named John, and the movie's named John's?
Yeah.
Is it just a story about 4 or 5 different Johns going around living life, or is there something there?
Highbrow stuff. Okay.
I imagine it's a bit darker than that.
Okay.
All right. Well, career explodes. He takes on the role of Officer Dewey or Doofy, depending on your preference, in the movie Scream in 1996, alongside Neve Campbell. That's where he met his eventual wife, Courtney Cox. That eventually led to them starting their own production company called Coquette, which is an interesting name. Married in 99, and then they had their daughter Coco in 2004. So it's not only a significant movie in his professional career, but also his personal career.
This movie is incredible.
It's incredible.
I showed this movie in my film class to talk to them about horror movies, and I did a lot of context setting of why this movie was so important and why it was so impactful.
Yep.
I feel like it's more clever than it is anything else. It's hard to go back and watch now, not because it's bad. I think it holds up well. Mm-hmm. Without the context of it, it's hard to understand why this movie hit the way it did. Like, people were scared to answer the phone when this movie came out.
This movie, in my opinion, is a timeless classic. I think that it changed horror movies forever. It ushered in this kind of idea of a meta-narrative and spawned countless imitations. It is a slasher film where the characters are self-aware of its, quote, rules to live by and die by. It's got a masked killer that loved horror movies and wasn't an even evil entity that was inexplicably strong or unkillable like Halloween or Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. But it's just a guy in a costume who sprints after you with a knife, who you could trick or trip or fight back against, but also be killed by. which is kind of scary in a real and believable and unique way.
And the ghost face mask is still something that people that's
iconic,
culturally identifiable still. And it's just Scream, I think all the Screams, I'm a fan of all the Screams, even the new ones.
Me too.
I think they're all great. I think the first one is like legendarily good. Think about an actor's career, specifically an actor that's tied to a franchise and they were never able to break out of that. This probably has to be one of the worst ones for someone like David Arquette to be tied to. Because, and I didn't think about this until you said it, but the Dewey thing really hurt him.
Yes.
It had to have. Because Scary Movie was big. It sounds dumb, but Scary Movie was big.
Mm-hmm.
And that character was very memorable. Like the Dewey thing had to hurt him. And so like the parody of that, the character itself almost played into it as the movies went on. It became a thing that like, it became more and more ridiculous. There's a level of unseriousness to that Dewey character that comes off as endearing in the movies. But when you look at it outside of the vacuum of those movies, it's really complicated for him to break outside of that.
What I think is interesting rewatching it, right? I've watched it a ton. It's such a genre-bending film in so many different ways, but his genuine chemistry with Courtney Cox on screen is pivotal to the story, right? And going on all the Scream films, and it's because the two of them are literally falling for each other on set, which I think is really interesting. So that was a part as I rewatched. I was kind of looking for those dynamics, and like any twisty horror film, you're trying to see like, did I miss something before it was a clear indicator, right? Like when we watched Sixth Sense for Toni Collette, and I'm like, there was that bit of dialogue that has to work, otherwise the rest of the film doesn't, right? She says that in the dining room at that restaurant, like, all right, you're sold after that point. If you buy into that, you buy into the rest.
Well, I mean, this movie was doing stuff that no other horror movie at that time was doing. Like
two killers like that.
The two killers thing. There's no way you can say you knew that was coming. I showed this to a group of kids in 2023, the end of 2023, and they were blown away by what they were like, I had no idea what was going on. Like, that's how good that they did that part of it. But even the relationship with him and Courtney Cox's character, it's great and it works in the vacuum of those movies. It is a little clunky and goofy how it works between them and how it goes throughout all of those things, which it plays into this like unseriousness around him.
Yeah.
Matthew Lillard in this movie is doing something unserious, but that's who he is. He's owning it, and it's supposed to be that way.
Amy Kennedy.
Yeah, but even he's unserious in a trope way.
Mm-hmm.
Dewey's unserious in a way that just seems like that's who that person is. Like that's who that actor is.
Yeah.
Because that Dewey character could have been anything. That unseriousness attaches itself to David Arquette in a way that I don't think he was ever able to shake. That character could have been anything because it's not a trope.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have literally been any type of version.
Really good point.
And so that's what I feel like he gets trapped under.
Felt like he was a guy that wanted to be a cop, but like wasn't really mature enough in life for the job and didn't really get taken that seriously. That was always my interpretation of it.
Yeah, it's spot on.
He could be a cop in a small town because stakes are lower there.
Right.
Because it's less like he can be incompetent there, but he couldn't be a cop in a bigger city.
Right.
I just think he's a good-hearted human being, right? And I think that just oozes out of him into these roles. I don't think he could have played this any other way. I agree, Aubrey. But at the same time, I think that in this particular role, why I think he's great is because I felt like he was in over his head the whole time. Both with the killing going on and with Courtney Cox, with Gale Weathers or whatever.
Oh, he's distracted.
That lends itself to this character. The downside of it is you nailed it. It can't be played any other way then. For the whole series, he is going to be this small box. As good as he is at it, it doesn't give his character a lot of room for movement.
Well, it can't grow because he is endearing, and that's what makes it work. He's incompetent in a way that's like, oh, he's gonna get it though. Like, oh, he's trying.
Yeah.
So that fits fine. Because again, like even though like kids are getting murdered, we're not expecting him to solve it. He's not. We all know who's gonna figure it out. It's not gonna be him.
Yeah.
So the stakes are really low in that. this is a good point that you make, because you can't make him serious later. They try.
They do.
Yeah, they did.
But you can't make him serious later because that's not who this character ends up being. So it's just like it gets parodied in a way that is just
Brutal.
biting. And he can't shake it.
There's nobody in Scary Movie portrayed worse. But the irony is, at the end of the movie, he's also Kaiser Sose. So
That's right.
he's the mastermind, but yet
It's the smoothest guy by the end.
it's uncomfortable to watch in the context of like, okay, I'm going to watch Scary Movie explicitly for
The Scream references.
the doofy character. And I was uncomfortable going, man, they are beating the shit out of this guy. And I feel bad.
It's a good foundation because we covered Sean William Scott 2 episodes ago, and we talked about his tie to the American Pie franchise, and could he ever rise into a different type of role? And I mean, when we compare and contrast, and at the end of the day, even though Sean William Scott has struggled to move out of that, I think he's done a better job of taking on different types of roles than David Arquette has. I think that's
That's a great shout. I think American Pie is a better franchise to be attached to long term for your career. It was something he could do. Like, I know we talked about this and how like culture kind of shifted on the raunchy comedy, which kind of upended Sean William Scott. David Arquette's boxed in a way that's like, it's just unreal how he got boxed in inside this, because he can't even shift to other horror movies.
Well, let's keep her moving. That was a fascinating conversation, though. But coming off that, meets Courtney. Guess where he ends up next? On the set of Friends, doing an episode in 1996. That connection is very obvious there. Yeah, again, another big show around that time. How you get on that show is pretty obvious, given your Courtney Cox connection there and their love coming together. He does the Scream 2 sequel in 1997. Strike While the Iron's Hot. Obviously, that character.
Good sequel.
Noticeably funnier and less scary than the original.
Good sequel, and that's what... Is that Timothy Olyphant is the killer? Which one is Olyphant's the killer?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's when they go to college. Yeah. Scream 2.
Yep.
Arquette gets the shit stabbed out of him and looks very dead. They make a ton more of these, so you know he's not dead, but he looked really dead.
3 is the only one where it's a single killer. No, 2 is the woman and Timothy Olyphant.
Laurie Metcalf.
Yeah, Laurie Metcalf. 3 is the only one where there's a solo killer.
Scream 3 is by far the least stupid Arquette has been in these movies. I think they made a conscious effort to not make him such an idiot.
Yeah.
I like the angle of the killers killing actors about to play the characters that were killed in the first movie in the same order. I mean, when you're doing a meta horror movie franchise, you can't really get more meta than that. And so I thought that was a interesting way to kind of spice it up a little bit.
James, that reminds me of Tropic Thunder when Robert Downey Jr. gives the famous speech, I know who I am. I'm the dude playing the dude disguised as another dude.
In this movie, someone actually gets beat with a frying pan like Daffy Duck. That made me laugh. Parker Posey's type of humor is perfect for these movies. She's going to be in The White Lotus, and I think she's going to be great in that. I'm excited for that. Carrie Fisher saying that she looks like Carrie Fisher, and then talking about the only reason she didn't get the role in Star Wars over Carrie Fisher is because she didn't blow George Lucas, was laugh out loud funny. It was such a good meta joke to just throw in there. She must have just been on set that day.
Scream 4 is Emma Roberts. I love Scream 4.
Scream 4 is awesome.
Scream 4 is awesome.
The opening to Scream 4 is the best opening of the Scream movies. Maybe Scream 1. Second best opening of the
That's
opening of
Scream 2.
Scream 4 is they do it like 3 or 4 times. So Scream 4 is like it's 2 blonde girls watching the thing and talking about it, and then you realize that that's a stab movie, and they do it like 3 or 4 different times.
Yeah, that was the whole purpose of that movie, was meta. So they started it off with like a meta.
Yeah.
I ride for Scream 4. That is a solid movie.
Arquette must have been busy when they were filming this, because he's mostly just running around in this movie 5 minutes late to every killing.
Am I misremembering it? Wasn't David Arquette's character supposed to get killed off in Scream 1, but they liked him so much?
It would make sense if that's how it went.
I don't know.
I'm highly confident that test audiences did not like the version where he got killed off in Scream 1. They re-edited it so he did survive, and then that allowed him to be in the sequels.
I believe you.
Yeah, that would make sense.
All right, a movie I'd never seen before. I was finally knocked off right in the final moments. Never Been Kissed. He plays Robert, Drew Barrymore's brother. And now I actually understand the reference in Not Another Teen Movie. I guess I just never connected the dots of the old ass reporter who's in the school and says, "Thanks, dudes." And this is the story of Drew Barrymore going undercover as a high school student to crack the case.
Well, how was his role in this? Because this was such a Drew Barrymore dominated vehicle. I don't remember anybody but.
He's an important supporting character in there as her brother. He's like an aspiring baseball guy. He wanted to play baseball in college. And so I think he goes undercover as well at one point at the high school. And the coach is like, "We're putting you at shortstop, blah, blah, blah." So it's exactly what you would expect out of David Arquette. Nothing surprising.
We're going to say that quite a bit tonight.
This is another comparison movie for me because it's so fresh. I look at this and then I look at Clueless with Paul Rudd. And I see their characters as very similar with very different careers after that. And that's because like Paul Rudd is actually funny. David Arquette's not really funny.
Well, I was going to ask you, what did you think about this movie? Because I watched this for the first time also.
I didn't get a chance to finish it, so I'm going to hold off my real thoughts. Okay. Like I'd probably like a 50, 55 probably if I had to score it right now.
I'd probably go lower than that. I don't like this movie very much. I don't fully understand it. I think that's what it is. It's like I shoot a lot of bail to older movies because it's just a different time, different things. Sure. If I can find how the audience would get there, then cool. I don't understand this movie. It's not all that funny. Drew Barrymore, she's fine, but like she's so handicapped with this like weird role they're asking her to play in this absurd premise. This movie's also like David Arquette plays the creepiest character in the movie. He's like openly courting like 16-year-olds. It's weird.
Yeah, I don't think I got to that point in the movie yet. I didn't get there.
But like they make jokes about it and stuff like that, which was odd. Her falling for the teacher and the teacher falling for her. The bit at the end where she goes to the baseball field didn't make any sense. It seems like this is a movie that people reference because they could just reference the clever title. Like the title explains everything. So you can reference that, but I can't imagine this being something that people were watching and being like, yeah, this movie's awesome. I love it so much.
I feel like this is the last gasp of the 21 Jump Street TV show premise, where they were like, can we still get adults into high school and have them pass? Because the premise is absurd. And as you were talking, I was trying to think of any movies that ever really pulled that off. And the TV show for 21 Jump Street was so massive that I bet you they were just trying to, let's see if we can do it one more time. And doesn't sound like it held up.
The status of adults getting to see that was probably similar to myself, which has never been viewed.
It hadn't been for me until 2 hours ago. I'm just glad I now understand the reference in Not Another Teen Movie. It's valuable for that alone for me, and that's about it.
Yeah, you got to have all the pieces.
That's right. It's a phenomenal film.
I just like at the end of a Scary Movie when he drops the coffee mug like in Usual Suspects and it says Doofus Porcelain. That just makes me laugh every time.
All right, his first of two Muppets movies. Muppets from Space. He plays Dr. Tucker alongside F. Murray Abraham, who plays Noah, like Noah's Ark, and Annie McDowell, who plays the reporter who fights with Miss Piggy. He's in one scene as a sadistic rat lab tech scientist.
Oh, all right. So he's going off brand a little bit in a Muppet movie.
A little bit. He's performing tests because Rizzo ends up getting sent down to the rat lab with some others, and David Arquette's the mad scientist.
See, that's when you fire your agent right there. That's just that's a downward trajectory.
It's not good.
Knowing what we know about him, you know how geeked out he must have been to be in a Muppet movie.
That's true.
In these Muppet movies, like they were big like catches for like 20 to 25 different actors who just do their one scene. Like they're kind of famous for that. So he probably saw it as it's a pop culture thing.
That's fair.
The one he was in was a very merry Muppet Christmas movie. He plays Daniel. Basically, Whoopi Goldberg plays God in that one. And he plays basically an angel who's trying to help Kermit because Kermit's losing his damn mind because Joan Cusack She plays a demon, and not a real demon, but she's basically taken over the theater they're using to put on their performance. And Kermit's like losing his mind, and David Arquette's watching from heaven and trying to get God to like basically pull some favors to help out Kermit. That's his role in that one. So
I love Joan Cusack.
that was straight to DVD, I think. I don't think it was actually in theaters.
Had to be. I mean, that sounds like one of the OG straight to DVDs. And I always thought the Muppets were a group of critters that could kind of get their shit together on their own. I didn't know they needed bad human roles to help them out, but what do I know?
You need David Arquette, the angel.
They needed David Arquette.
His name, his character's name was Daniel. So there you go. You needed Daniel at that point. 2 Muppet movies, and badge of honor. The Millennium hits, and as part of Scream 3, I believe, Creed released the song "What If." And if you watch a music video, you will see David Arquette on the front end of that. You know, Creed's got a resurgence right now.
I know they do.
It's worth somebody.
I've missed every Creed music video that's ever been released, and I will probably continue to miss them. So,
case.
So long as you saw the Dallas halftime for the Super Bowl, then you saw it all. Nothing more epic than that. I mean, come on. Yeah, I forgot about that Creed song, What If. That rocked. And it was playing in the beginning when, what's his name, Cotton Weary gets killed. And you're like, damn, they got rid of him quick.
oh, really?
Yeah, because he's all rich from like having a radio station or something. In the beginning of Scream 3, you're like, all right. It's kind of a cool intro. I mean, it was a bad movie of it. That was kind of the cool part of it.
Ready to Rumble put him in the spotlight of wrestling where he really, his heart wanted to be. Like, he wanted that recognition.
I couldn't finish this movie. It is intentionally dumb, but like really low on moments that made me laugh, and really high on moments where I was like, that's kind of gross and stupid. I was an hour in when I saw it had another hour, and I was like, no, it's too much. I watched too many Scream movies to watch this and waste my time.
If I'm thinking of it correctly, and Aubrey, you'll definitely know this, they were using WCW and WWE to promote Ready to Rumble, and then that's where some dots started getting connected.
This is where he killed his career with Ready to Rumble. This is really what put the fork in it, from my understanding.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons why.
Did anybody watch this?
I did.
This was my first time watching it.
Same.
Growing up a wrestling fan and being a wrestling fan at this time, this was still my first time watching this movie. And it's god-awful. I didn't finish it. I watched like 30 minutes of it, and I was like, I'm not doing this.
I haven't seen it, admittedly, since I want to say middle school, but at the time, for some reason, some pals and I thought it was hilarious. I've got multiple viewings under my belt, but I'd be lying if I said I'd ever give it another shot.
That's the clientele, though.
It's a film, if you watch when you were in middle school, you probably would enjoy. And if the first time you watch it like me, it was at almost 36 years old, and being a WWF fan, I was not a WCW guy growing up. It just reminded me of why I wasn't a WCW fan watching that movie. To be honest.
I think the marketing on this was more WCW than it was WWF, though.
100%. That's what I'm saying.
There's all WCW guys in the movie.
It's Sting, it's Diamond Dallas Page, it's all those guys. It's all. That's my point, is that I watched it and I was like, this
black tights, Randy Savage.
This is why I didn't watch this stuff, because I didn't really care for these wrestlers.
So remind me of the premise. I know it's him and Scott Conn.
Yep.
How do they get connected to wrestling again?
They are obsessed with a wrestler played by Oliver Platt,
which is insane.
Oliver Platt.
He is the king, Jimmy King, the king. His whole persona. Basically, they collude against him, led by Joey Pants. To basically, he's been the champion. They basically set it up to like they wipe out his career, so he's off the map. And then those two go on the road to find him where he lives, and then inspire him to get back out there because he's the king. And then they become essentially as like tag team partners by the end of the movie, and become part of the industry.
That's wild irony.
But ultimately, here's the problem with the movie. The problem with the movie is that it is everything that people who don't like wrestling think adults who like wrestling are like. And that's why I didn't want to watch it. It's because, like, those two characters believe what's happening
is real.
Happening.
Yeah.
And, like, there's this blind devotion and immaturity and, like, lack of awareness that gets associated to people who watch wrestling. That's always kind of been a thing. Which, I mean, we're kind of out of it now, but that's always been the thing around the time. Like, oh, you still watch wrestling? You know it's fake, right? And this movie represents that person who asked that question.
Okay.
Him doing the WCW stuff, which we'll talk about later, was terrible. But it was terrible in large part, I think, because of this movie. I think this movie insults its base.
To be fair, he became a champion of the WCW. And that part of that was to promote this film. And the head at WCW felt like it would be good for business. And it turned out to be terrible for business because all the fans were like, you're not real. Right. And that's what led him to go into You Cannot Kill David Arquette. He's like, I want to do it legit. I want to actually train. I love this sport. I hate that I am tied to just a laughing stock. And so I found the documentary incredibly fascinating to watch. Because you're watching a guy who genuinely loves wrestling and has his entire life and knew that he got manipulated by the business, and it not only ruined his like affinity for wrestling, it killed his movie career.
Yeah.
And that sucks. Not that he was going to be an Oscar-winning dramatic actor. I don't think that was going to happen.
He at least had an upward trajectory.
Oh, he's moving there.
After Ready to Rumble, if it's flat, that's flattering. I don't even think it's a flat trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an error of the actors. I don't blame the actors in this situation because you do a job and you show up to do the job and you have no idea.
Scott Caan's fun. Yeah, he does his thing.
This is the fault of the people who put this together, like who wrote this and produced this and directed this, because it's not flattering to people who like wrestling. It doesn't. I don't see how this would make people want to watch wrestling. The only people that would like this movie are people that were in middle school. I think it's really, honestly, if I watched this movie at the time when I was that age, I probably would have liked it.
We have celebrity boxing and we have rap battles, in David Arquette's career.
All right, Case, tell us about 3,000 Miles to Graceland with your favorite, Kurt Russ. He plays Gus. What do we need to know?
This thing's loaded with stars, right? Kevin Costner, Kurt Russell, Courtney Cox, Christian Slater, on and on and on and on. It's tremendously casted. There was a lot of friction about directing and how it was going to be edited. And I took away three things from this. If you're still getting popcorn and you missed the first third of the movie, you won't know David Arquette's in it. He gets killed off real fast. Courtney Cox it was distracting how attractive she was. I was distracted. That's all I can say. And then number three, Kurt Russell, he's the best. If we ever do Kurt Russell, I'm telling you right now, it's just 100.
Yep, just flat. You're starting with 100 and you might nitpick down to 98.
He is by far and away my favorite actor of all time. I've just come to that realization. And I'm watching him and Costner, and this is Costner at his peak. And Kurt Russell just steals the show. Fun movie to watch. And I love Elvis, so kind of can't go wrong.
Yeah, I saw the ratings. It's like a 19 Metascore on IMDb. It's real bad.
The funnest thing about this movie is like all the stuff behind the scenes.
You do love a good behind the scenes story.
Kurt Russell met Elvis, so he's playing Elvis. There's just a ton of really cool little trivia things in there to watch.
So speaking of movies that I would not recommend people pay to see, C-Spot Run. And this is the bottom of the barrel for David Arquette. This is...
What a terrible intro.
Luckily, it was free.
Yeah.
Some streaming service, because I had never seen C-Spot Run. Actually, I lied. I had seen it before, because as you're watching, you're like, oh yeah, I do remember this now. And his hair is just insane. It's a dog movie. The dog doesn't die, so maybe James does need to watch this, because that's usually his kickback with dog movies. But C-Spot Run has awful reviews and is truly, truly terrible movie.
I saw the one clip where him and Anthony Anderson.
Yeah, Anthony Anderson's in it.
They're having a dance battle. They bring in about a 6'3", 225-pound linebacker to be his body double during the dancing scenes. And it's clearly not David Arquette breakdancing. God bless you, David Arquette. I think you could breakdance, but that was not you. And you weren't fooling anybody.
Do your own stunts, bro. There's a whole scene where he gets stuck outside and he like shits himself, and the neighbors come and fight it. It's known for all the wrong reasons, unfortunately.
I might lift a score on my Munson meter.
Well, there you go. The Gray Zone, 2001, alongside Steve Buscemi and Natasha Lyonne. It's a movie about Nazis It's really dark. It's not great. It's like middle ratings. I watch it just because I was like, I'm curious. Interesting. Like, I like films about that time period. I obviously don't like what happened in that time period, but I enjoy films about it. But it's not a bad movie necessarily, but it's not a good movie either. And David Arquette is just kind of an ensemble character in that.
This is easily the heaviest movie he's had in his career so far.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, how does he do with a story that has that amount of gravity?
You see Natasha Lyonne and you're like, you don't really get used to taking her seriously in serious roles either. It's like a bunch of like B actors who come in to play a really serious story, except Harvey Keitel plays like one of the Nazi generals. And so that kind of throws you off because you're like, then it's Harvey Keitel? Like, huh? With what kind of accent? So
this is kind of off topic. I watched the movie The Duelists with him and Keith Carradine.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
It was Ridley Scott's first movie. It's one of my favorite movies. But it's funny because they're both supposed to be French hussars, but like he's got a Queen's accent and he just can't shake it.
He can't shake it.
No.
I don't think he's known for his accents. All right, well, next we're going to talk about Case's VR experience rewatching Eight-Legged Freaks.
This movie's CGI is way better than it has any right being. For a movie that came out like 20 years ago, I expected it to look terrible. All things considered, it wasn't that bad. That's also kind of my opinion on this movie in general. I think this movie's like a good B movie. It's campy and stupid and fun and a little gross, and I liked it more than I thought I would.
And it holds up under VR scrutiny. It was not distracting at all.
Really?
Putting in context, right? Like the context of that movie, special effects were way better than they should have been at that time.
I love this movie. I didn't rewatch it for this because I don't have to. This movie is embedded into my heart. I love this movie so much. There's so much to love about it.
You got a young ScarJo in this. I forgot she was in this.
Oh, yeah. Really young.
She's doing her thing.
It's my second favorite. You didn't know Scarlett Johansson was in this movie, Paul. With the first being
Home Alone 3.
Home Alone 3.
Yeah. A bad taste. I know.
It's one of those movies that like you watch with your dad and you turn your brain off and you're like, that's funny. The cat's in the wall. Like, it's good. I don't know. I liked it way more than I thought I was going to.
It's a fun creature feature. And my only sadness with this film is that Carrie Wurr didn't become a bigger thing because she one of them ones as well.
What are we missing here, guys? We talked about this already on this podcast. If you have not seen Carrie Wurr movies, what are you doing, people?
Yeah.
This woman is amazing.
She's one of them ones.
She was really good in this movie, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, legitimately good.
Dougie Doug, playing the conspiracy theorist podcaster, basically. Entertaining. Perfect fit after Cool Runnings, like 3 years later.
Love that guy.
The fun thing you get from a VR experience on this, I go largest screen, so I can't see the whole screen at one time. Like, and there's spatial sound. So, like, as I'm looking to the right, watching what's going on over here, I hear a spider attacking on my left, and I got to look over to my left real fast and see it. So
that would freak me out. I ain't gonna lie.
It was an enjoyable VR experience. I do have to give it credit to that. And 23 years after this movie was made, it still holds up in a VR environment.
This movie and roll's worth a couple points for me on the Munson Meter. Just because I don't know what it is. It's been stuck in my brain of him screaming, "Freaks!" Like that quote is like stuck in my head for 20 years. And I kept looking for it in the movie.
It's a good time. If you like these type of movies, and for whatever reason you've missed this, you have to watch it.
You do.
But when we talk about this in the context of his career, it's not a great choice.
No.
I get why Carrie Wurr does this movie. I get why Scarlett Johansson does this movie. Carrie Wurr is a better example here. Like, Carrie Wurr being in this movie is an example of the injustice done to women in Hollywood. Like, she has no business being in this movie, but she has to be in this movie because, the same reason why all the women are in Deep Blue Sea. Like, well, I have to do something. Mm-hmm. And, they let me talk in this movie. So, that's why she's in it. But David Arquette is someone who, like, as he laments in You Cannot Kill David Arquette, which we'll talk about later, he wants to be taken seriously. This is not a movie that you choose if you want to be taken seriously.
Correct.
This is a movie that someone like David Arquette does when he tried to be taken seriously, and you don't do this in the middle of your career.
In the prime.
Because these are the type of things that pigeonhole you.
Mm-hmm.
B, creature feature horror movies like this, that's a box you can never get out of once you fall into it. Hard recommend on this movie, though.
Yeah.
Would you hard recommend him alongside DMX and Never Die Alone from 2004?
Well, yeah, because it's DMX. I'd hard recommend anything DMX.
DMX is my favorite rapper of all time.
Wow, okay.
We can unpack it another. I think I've seen every movie he's been in, and I love every movie he's been in.
Yeah.
My fandom, I'm loyal. I'm a Raiders fan. I'm loyal when I'm your fan. I don't care. I think DMX is a good actor. Like, full stop. I think he's a solid actor, I'll say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Serviceable.
He exceeds expectations. Again, this, like Eight-Legged Freaks, I probably haven't watched since I was in high school. I'd say for different reasons. But I don't have to watch this movie again because I remember it pretty well, because this movie, it just mattered to me the way that DMX mattered. I don't necessarily think the movie is good.
No.
There's a lot of stuff that the movie's trying to do that I don't think works. Stylistically, I don't think the movie looks very good. The premise is an odd one. David Arquette, I don't think is the person you want in the role that he's playing.
Yeah, it's very odd.
It doesn't work in that sense.
What is his role in this movie?
Kyle, you could probably speak to the specifics of this a lot better than I can, but he finds these tapes of DMX, who was like this big time like drug dealer, and he's like listening to these tapes and like kind of unpacking. We learn about DMX's character through David Arquette's exploration of him.
The screenplay is kind of poorly constructed, specifically for his character and playing the role, because like the story is he like takes off, starts this new life, and then just abuses women for the last 45 minutes of the movie, to the point where I quoted you guys in the chat the quote that stood out to me, but I believe it was, "Stupid bitch doesn't know the difference between coke and heroin." And I will forever remember that line, because she died because she didn't know the difference between coke and heroin's a hell of a drug.
Where does the title come from?
The movie's based off a book.
Oh,
Okay.
The thing I like about this in terms of DMX is a really complex individual, which gets explored a lot by fans of his music and people that followed him at the time. As an actor, he was also really complex as well. Belly's the best example of this. I think he's really good in Belly. He contains depths past whatever he's showing you. There's an intrigue past what you see. There's more to him just as an individual, and that comes across on screen, which is what I think makes him such a compelling rapper.
Yeah.
So even when he's not quote unquote good in a movie, that part to me is always intriguing. That part works for me in this.
his character's narrating the film, essentially.
Which is something that I think is a good use of his talents. The David Arquette of it all lets it down. This was the tease I was making before, though. David Arquette, an actor who's been in big things at a time, is standing next to, at the time, the biggest rapper in the world. At this time, DMX, there was no bigger rapper in the world than DMX at this time.
Yeah.
You see why, because DMX is super charismatic, even as an actor, which not all rappers can do, because acting charisma is a different thing. And this is what I think makes DMX a compelling actor, is he's really charismatic. And when you put them two together like that, DMX is the person that to me still stands out as a charisma.
It's presence.
It's presence in the context of film that should be surprising. DMX is a bigger entertainer and a bigger personality. So outside of the context of film, I would expect DMX to be the person you're drawn to. But in movies, we've seen musicians fall short on this all the time. I mean, Taylor Swift is one of the biggest artists to ever live. She does terrible in movies. So that doesn't always correlate. But for David Arquette to stand next to someone like DMX and not be able to draw enough to even run parallel to him, is one of the problems, I think, with what happens in his movies.
It's an indictment on him as like his range and his presence on screen, for sure. A lot of kind of what happens between 2004 and 2019. I mean, you got The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. He plays the dad in that movie. I mean, it had an audience. I didn't rewatch it for this, but I guess there's an audience there. He directs his first picture in 2006, The Tripper. Nothing really notable outside of, even The Tripper's not notable.
Yeah.
It's just notable because it's his first directing credit, so it's in the show notes.
Yeah, I think he wrote, directed, and starred in it, right?
I think so. He makes an appearance in Medium, 3 appearances in Medium, but that's because, Patricia's the main star in the show Medium at that time. It's a big show in the 2000s. He's doing other stuff during this time too, but just not a lot of it's noteworthy.
Yeah.
To be completely honest.
You can see the wheels have fallen off at this point.
Oh, yeah.
To the point, the Ready to Rumble point after that, shortly after that, is Eight-Legged Freaks, which is usually when you see a known actor in a movie like Eight-Legged Freaks, you're like, uh-oh, what happened here? Then he's doing like gritty crime film noirs with Spike Lee's cinematographer in DMX.
Yep.
He's not the main character. Like, that movie is David Arquette's not in the trailers of that movie.
His character doesn't really play that. I mean, it plays a role, but again,
as you go on, it's and I don't mean this in a condescending way, it's sad. Because you can just see the wheels have fallen off at this point.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you look at this, he does one episode of My Name is Earl, and James said he really enjoyed his appearance. Or he was being sarcastic, or was that you, Case?
That was me. Ironically, he plays a character who suffers from amnesia. So every time he goes to sleep, he forgets what happened, and he thinks he's on the day where he's a stuntman whose life has fallen apart.
Oh, that's kind of sad.
Wife has left him.
Oh, boy.
His wife is Kenny Powers' love interest from Eastbound and Down. His appearance in this episode is really funny. So if you're a fan of My Name is Earl, look up the episode. I think it's called Sweet Johnny.
Sweet Johnny, yep.
There's a lot of layers that make this an entertaining episode.
Just knowing what's coming in his personal life, it just feels like reflective of his actual life, which is kind of sad when you think about it. But 2008 to 2009, he did 4 episodes of Pushing Daisies, a show that we covered when Sam was here with Zoe Deschanel, because that was a big show with her during that time. So he's just doing a lot of like a couple episodes of TV. And then 2010 is when he and Courtney started to separate. They didn't officially get divorced until 2013. So it essentially took 4 years. But I would assume, especially after seeing the documentary, that watching your film career kind of go to shit after the whole WCW thing and Ready to Rumble, you're going to bring a lot of that home with you, right? It's compartmentalizing that with the relationship, the marriage. Whereas Courtney Cox is still thriving doing her stuff, right? Like,
yes, she's still on the rocket ship.
You're going to be comparing yourself to your wife all the time, and if you're not mentally like talking through that, that's hard. When he checked into rehab in 2011, did Scream 4, so again cashing that check again, but nothing new coming back to the franchise. And good paycheck.
It's almost odd that he goes into Scream 4 after this. Like, I mean, I remember it being cool to see him and not really know what he was doing, but it's almost odd where his career is at that they even went back to it. I mean, I guess you have to because
of the character dynamics with Courtney Cox and all that.
I mean, ultimately, it's a good thing that, you know, he had that, but the two just diverge in career paths. It's got to be hard because she's like a mega star.
Yeah. One thing I will say about that situation, I don't love to get into the personal side of things, but I do find it very admirable that you don't see either one of them saying anything bad about the other.
No, they co-parent.
And they seem cool. Yeah.
They seem like they support each other. You know, I think it just probably figured out like this isn't going to work. I mean, he starts dating Christina McClarty in 2011. So while they're still technically married and still with her, they had 2 kids together, got married in 2015, and he seems happy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that documentary was a few years ago, so can't really speak to that. But he put some stress on her by going down that route. But
the one thing I'd say about the Courtney Cox thing, because I don't like to get into the relationship stuff a ton either, is it did provide me with one of my favorite Friends memories of all time. Because I'm a huge Friends fan. Like I've seen that show probably start to finish like 9 or 10 times. I absolutely love that show. And I remember an episode after they got married and she changed her name to Courtney Cox Arquette. Everybody in the cast did that on the opening. So it was David Schwimmer Arquette. It was they all did it, and it was something that I've always remembered, and I thought was hilarious, and to me set a vibe for that show that I enjoyed. Like this is how much
they're getting meta.
This is how much fun that they have with this type of thing. That you do that for the opening credits of your show.
It's a collective choice. During the mid 2010s, he's doing a lot more TV and a lot of recurring roles. So he did 128 episodes of Captain Jake and the Neverland Pirates. He played Scully, so some voice work. Tron Uprising, he did 7 episodes of that. Cleaners, he did 18 episodes of that, and an episode of Entourage. Like, you pivot your career if you're not getting the film roles, and you're like, I need more consistent income job, do the acting thing I love. You go to TV, because TV starts to come back around, right? To Case's point, in the 90s, you want to do movies.
Yeah.
And 2010s, 2020s, it's a lot more stable. It's consistent paychecks. Like, that's where you go.
I have a theory about this period of his career. I think he's probably very well liked in the Hollywood circles by a lot of people. I think people are like, yeah, I really like him. Can we get him for an episode? That'd be great. He made a line in that documentary I completely disagree with, where he said that he's auditioning for 10 years and he's not getting a job.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. So I think a lot of people like him and they're like, hey, we got a spot in a TV show. We'd love to have you. And he's like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
I go the other way on this, and I might be pessimistic, but I feel like he's pulling favors.
You think?
I don't disagree.
But they like him well enough to do it, They don't.
Yeah. I don't disagree with the fact that people, when Hollywood wants to blackball you, they have no problem blackballing you. Like, I don't think that's what it is.
Yep.
I just think he's pulling favors because he has enough friends and family that work in the business to be like, hey, I need a job. Can you?
Yeah, like, help me out here. Let's do something. I've got a name. I can help get at least some people to your show or movie or whatever. We're going to get into highest critic score. And it's a film that David Arquette is not in much. I'll just clarify before Sam digs into this. But Sam, our guest Munson, is going to review this movie. And even though David's not in it much, it's a bananas movie. And so I'm really interested to see how Sam reviews this thing as highest critic score. Bone Tomahawk.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you guys want me to get into it, but this was a movie I saw like for the last, I don't know how many years. I've always like all of my movies, my movie collection is all digital. So like I'll check every Tuesday when movies have been released and it'll be like new releases. And, like half of them will be like stuff that came from theater. The other half is bullshit like VOD. And so I remember seeing that one and it had not been released in theaters. And I looked at the cast and I was like, Richard Jenkins, Patrick Wilson, Kurt Russell, pretty good cast. Like, what is this? And then, yeah, like I really liked it. A buddy and I were trying to find a movie one night, and we happened upon that. And we're like, read the synopsis, and we're like, oh yeah, we're in.
Mm-hmm.
The plot is basically like it's the Old West. There's a little town called Bright Hope. And the movie starts off with David Arquette and the guy who plays Captain Spaulding in Three from Hell and the Rob Zombie movies, Sid Haig.
Sid Haig, yep.
Yeah. And they're like in the burial grounds of these troglodytes or these Indian cave people. The one guy doesn't make it, and then Arquette goes into the town to like bury his loot. And so Kurt Russell is the sheriff, and they go and question him and shoot him in the leg. And Patrick Wilson's wife is the doctor's daughter, and the doctor's drunk, so she's working on him. And the next morning, like the wife, Arquette, and one of the other deputies is missing. So the movie's basically like a rescue mission to go find them. And they find out that they're looking for troglodytes because they leave an arrow. One of the like local Indians who, of course, movie stereotypes, they're all really, really mean to him, even though he's being helpful and telling them like the information they need. He's like, yeah, it's this. And they're like, stupid Indian. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's just typical. I wouldn't say it was as drastic as like From Dusk Till Dawn in terms of a genre twist. They do like the stable kid gets killed. It's pretty gory. So and it shows you from the beginning, like there's some gnarly stuff, but I don't know if y'all watched it, but there's a scene in there at the end that even like kind of turned my stomach. And I was like, whoa.
You watch stuff like that, so I know you have a stomach for those kinds of things.
Right. And so my buddy and I both watched that scene. If you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it's just like, oh my God, they put that into this. Like, so yeah, the last 30 minutes of the movie, it gets really, really dark. And even though, it has a relatively happy ending, if that's what you want to call it, it doesn't leave you with the warm fuzzies. That being said, I get why critics liked it. It actually had some really good dialogue between some of the characters. Richard Jenkins played kind of a simpleton, which he seldom plays characters like that. And he played well off of Russell Crowe. He's like his assistant deputy, but he's not very smart.
I think there's a bunch of funny one-liners in this movie. When he says, oh man, that tea smells gruesome. And then Kurt Russell's like, it's soup. And he goes, oh, well then I'll have some. Or the piano player who plays songs and they get more expensive the more you play. I mean, the more you ask him to play because he doesn't want to play any songs. Love that bit. He has the soup and he goes, it tastes like corn. Russell goes, it's corn chowder. And Jenkins is like, well, then things are lining up. It's so good.
All the characters were great. But David Arquette, yeah, they find out that he had been eaten by the troglodytes by the time they actually get to them for the rescue party, which wouldn't matter because he was a criminal anyway. They didn't care about him. So the fact that he was eaten had no bearing on the plot. The only bad thing is it would have been kind of cool to show him get eaten, just since they already made it that gory. Why not go the full 9?
The opening scene of this movie is him murdering someone. I think his like creepiness and kind of off-putting nature really works well in this.
Very, very strange genre hybrid. One of the stranger ones that I can think of, but it actually worked.
It does.
90% sold itself as a full-on Western, but they put just enough in there in the beginning to kind of show you like there are bad things coming. Whereas with like From Dusk Till Dawn, it goes from like an outlaw movie. It goes from like Natural Born Killers to a vampire movie.
Mm-hmm.
Real abruptly.
Right. So this one, at least, you're somewhat forewarned, but the actors all do a really good job. You would think that the actors would have read that script and been like, we're not getting paid very much here, whatever, but like no one really dials it in. Even that guy, Matthew Fox from Lost, which God knows how that guy ever got famous. I mean, he's about as plain looking as they get. Even that guy does a pretty good job. Like everybody in it's pretty good, surprisingly good. So yeah, that was a delightful rewatch.
Patrick Wilson was my favorite. Like I liked his character and the development of it, and like he really makes you feel the pain that he's going through. And to be honest, I did not read the synopsis of this movie before I watched it. I was just told by James, you gotta watch it. He didn't give me any context. He just said, Kyle, you haven't seen Bone Tomahawk? Just watch it. Don't look up anything. And so I did not. Caught me a little off guard.
This movie is easily one of my favorite movies to suggest to someone when I want to completely sabotage their evening. It's like a spooky Western thriller that seemingly out of nowhere includes one of the most gruesome, horrific, and shocking death scenes I'd ever seen. It's like a good movie that decides to throw in this horrifically graphic murder, and if you're not prepared for you, it completely messes you up.
It's an interesting movie just because I actually like that Arquette's not in it much because it shows where his career's at.
Yeah.
And then Kurt Russell takes over, and you're like, all right, Kurt Russell.
He dies off screen.
Yeah, you don't even see him.
He dies off screen.
You assumed he would turn into lunch.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
Mm-hmm.
I went into this blind also. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I love Westerns. So I was like, bet. Kurt Russell Western, this makes perfect sense to me. I didn't know about the Matthew Fox thing. And I was like, Lost? What? Okay. I didn't realize we were in a horror movie until like 35 minutes in. When the black guy dies, that's when I knew we were in a horror movie. It sounds like a joke, but it's not entirely a joke. But when he died, I was like, wait a minute. This isn't a Western. It also made me go, who wrote and directed this movie? Because they treat Zon McClaren pretty bad, which we already covered. That's the Native American that they just kind of just dismiss. I've got questions about these cave people, and then the only black guy they kill gruesomely for no reason. I was just like, what's going on in this movie? What's happening here? But this movie's awesome.
Yeah, it really was. And then when they just like scalp and bisect that guy, I was just like, whoa, okay.
Pulled no punches whatsoever.
Brutal.
Mm-hmm.
What they do to Kurt Russell was brutal too.
Mm-hmm.
He somehow managed to stay alive to shoot those last 3 bastards, which was pretty rewarding.
Deserving highest critic score, but it's very indicative. Arquette's in it for 3 minutes, probably, maybe 4.
Yeah, he was just in over his head with talent.
Yep, killed off screen. I love that point.
Yeah,
Aubrey killed off screen, assumed to be dead. Wild. I kept waiting for him to come back. I'm like, oh, he's gonna. Nope, he didn't come back. So
yeah, when they like declared that he was dead, I just kind of laughed, but I was just like, oh, they killed you. They killed you off screen, my guy.
Did you dirty, as you would say. They did you dirty.
I'm trying to think of the last time that's happened.
That's hard. That's fucking hard.
They killed someone off screen. That's tough.
All right, so he goes from that to doing a Pee-wee's Big Holiday film. In 2016, he played DJ, so talk about change in genre. And then we get the lowest critic score, which is 2019's Mobtown. He plays Sergeant Ed Crosswell. James's review.
Mobtown came out in 2019 and has a score of 0 from the critics and 22 from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, so it's not great. The movie is based on a true story of a New York State trooper, Ed Croswell, who investigates and uncovers what would later be known as the Appalachian Meeting, which was a gathering of 100-plus high-profile mobsters from all around the world who held a meeting with the goal of centralizing the power of the various families in the Cosa Nostra during this meeting in the small town of Appalachian, which is in upstate New York. While this is an incredibly fascinating true story, this movie decided to tell it in like the most least fascinating way. By the end of the film, you won't know much about the actual events or the gangster character involved, but you will have learned plenty about what they ate, since the screenplay spends an inordinate amount of time on the meeting's catering. Despite its serious subject matter, Mobtown kind of assumes an oddly comic tone for much of its running time, coming across almost like a spoof at times. Unfortunately, they don't go far enough, in my opinion, and nothing is particularly funny, and the deadly pacing makes this movie seem so much longer than it actually is. The biggest issue, in my opinion, is that after a seemingly endless build-up, the quick and suspenseless sequence depicting the police raid on the meeting is incredibly anticlimactic. I think if this movie committed to being a comedy, then they might have had something here. The New York State trooper realizing that large amount of food was being purchased by the one suspected mob-affiliated guy in town leading up to the meeting did actually partly fuel the investigation in real life. I think if the story focused on that, plus having Jamie Lynn Sigler's character have a meltdown about figuring out how she's going to host so many people and where they're all going to sit and how many bathrooms they need. And I think that could have been a funny and creative way to tell this movie, like focusing on how hard it is to cater to this many mobsters, all of whom are traditionally enjoy expensive, high-quality meals, when you live kind of in the middle of nowhere, is a premise that would work and has never really been done before in the mob movie genre. But they decided to take a shot at many different versions of this movie and just kind of put them all together. Arquette plays the state trooper that figures this all out, and Mobtown in general kind of plays like a mediocre B movie that inexplicably can't decide if it wants to be dramatic, romantic, or comedic movie. Arquette brings his enjoyable shucks sincerity to the role as the cop, but never really proves convincing, as he's mostly the straight man in the comedic scenes as well. There's also an unrewarding subplot where Arquette's growing romantic relationship between him and the lovely Jennifer Esposito. The scenes with them is sweet and charming in kind of a low-key way, but they seem to be part of an entirely different movie, and they're just thrown in here. There is no suspense. There is no drama. There is no action. There is no thrill, no comedy. It has the look and feel of a television movie made to please everybody without showing any commitment to any genre of storytelling, and therefore ultimately it's just kind of odd and boring to watch. I'd split the audience and the critic scores and give this a 10 out of 100. It was very bad.
Well, James, I'm glad you watched that and we didn't need to.
A couple more here before we get to our last review. 2020, he played Chris Kunkel, which, what a name, in Spree, a movie that premiered at Sundance and is about basically like an Uber driver who goes off the deep end. I watched like half of it. I don't know if it's a very good movie. Arquette plays the kid's dad, who's constantly calling him to get picked up. But it's about a kid who's desperate for attention on this Spree app and decides to start murdering the people in his car.
It's a commentary on like social media attention.
Yeah, basically.
It stars the kid from Stranger Things, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
This was the first time I'd ever heard of it. First time I ever saw it. I think it's only like an hour and 12 minutes long, something like that. So I was all right with it. It was an interesting watch, at least. Mm-hmm. And he's playing a much different character.
Yes, he is.
In this movie than anything we've ever seen him in. So
he's basically playing like a deadbeat dad who can't get his shit together. So it was different. It was a different type of character.
He's a DJ at strip clubs.
That's right. So he's a businessman. He's an entrepreneur, as they say.
That's right.
But he did have a heart attack in 2020. And I know this was right around the time You Cannot Kill David Arquette happened, because, and I think we could transition to the documentary. Anything we haven't mentioned yet?
I watched this first and I regretted it because it made me feel terrible. He seems like such a good guy, and he's just quirky as hell, and he caught a really rough deal in a couple aspects of his career.
There was a big concern with him wrestling because he had his heart attack and had surgery. Obviously didn't want to create further health complications.
I have a really hot take about this documentary. I am struggling to find something that I have found more interesting that we've looked at in preparing for any of these episodes. This is one of the most fascinating things I've watched to get ready for an episode. I love this documentary.
The only documentary I think that rivals it is the Danny Trejo documentary that talked about his life.
Oh, yeah.
Because that dude lived a fucking bananas life before being an actor. That's the only thing I would say documentary-wise.
I would agree with you. Yeah, I think this is probably number 2 then. And I feel like this whole thing was a work. Like the story, like the real life stuff, like talk about his family, his relationships with Courtney and his current wife, and his I think all that stuff, the peripheral stuff, I think is being honest. Like I think everything really happened.
There's an element of theatrical production to it for sure.
He says in there, I've got a lot of Carney in me. I think a lot of his career and a lot of this documentary, and I loved it, and I love him. I think there's a lot of Carney going on, and I don't know how far to trust the narrative of this documentary outside of the real life things.
I think this movie is similarly fascinating. I think he's an interesting person. I think he's an endearing person.
Yeah.
I like him.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I want good things for him, even though I don't really want to watch his movies. I want good things for him. So this documentary kind of touches on that because I find myself rooting for him.
Yeah.
But I also find it really sad.
Oh, yeah.
When he's at the conventions and like nobody comes up to his table, you're just like, oh.
His teenage daughter hating his wrestling idea from the start was incredibly humanizing and relatable. I really enjoyed watching that because I think any father can relate to that kind of interaction.
I feel a little different than you guys do about his wrestling fandom. So this is something that kind of comes up with people who kind of get back into wrestling here and now. Like I haven't been a tried and true hardcore wrestling fan my entire life. I do really love the sport or all of it. And I watch it here and there, but I know a lot of the kind of the behind the scenes stuff. This is a thing that happens. I think he is a wrestling fan.
Oh yeah.
I think he did a movie which touched on him being a wrestling fan as a kid. I think he was in part using this wrestling thing for a thing. So when you say it's a work, I find that a really interesting choice of words because that is wrestling terminology.
Yeah.
What it is that he might be doing, which is putting on a show. So like, I think the course of the documentary shows that he becomes more appreciative and infatuated with
craft,
the community and the sport and the craft. Thank you. That's the word, with the craft.
Yeah.
I think that becomes a real thing.
Especially when he's doing suplexes in the middle of a street in Mexico. Like
what he has to do, I think, makes him that way.
Yeah.
I was laughing loudly and I had to keep watching it over when he's down in Mexico and they're doing street wrestling and they're asking for tips. And the one guy looks at him and goes, "Hey man, I thought you said this guy was cool."
Or when he goes to that backyard wrestling thing, it's like the saddest part of the movie and they're just beating the shit out of him. And at the end, they're like, nice, but it's really sad because they literally embarrass him.
Yeah.
That tells you a little bit about wrestling fans. Those backyard fans, the gatekeeping type that like, he's got to prove himself to me. I just roll my eyes at those guys. Like, come on, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I think two things can be true at one time. I think he becomes a deeper fan of the sport and the craft and the art of it. I think it grows as he does those things.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a sense of you seeing him in over his head because he doesn't know what he's doing in these places. And it's because like he's not really in it like that. And so this kind of does two things at one time. But this redemption I think he's seeking from wrestling fans, I don't think that's a real thing. I don't think there's wrestling fans sitting around being like, man, you know what? Fuck David Arquette for his WC. The people aren't doing that. No one knows and cares or remembers that happened. So I think that you calling it a work and the theatrics of it, I think is really important. And I think what ended up happening almost was an accident.
The spray tan scene was laugh out loud funny. That's clearly a man who's never been spray tanned before, and the only reason I know this is because of the women in my life who have been spray tanned. Him getting wet and just looking like he was melting was hilarious.
They caught lightning in a bottle with that clip where he gets stabbed in the neck.
Oh yeah.
That's jarring. Like, I typically avoid watching that shit. And I saw, and I was like, wait, what? What did I just see? When I watched the documentary, I thought I was going to see him get hurt, but not really see him spraying blood out of his neck.
Mm-hmm.
And wow.
I think it shows how reckless he is and how like
Yep.
how much approval matters to him.
Mm-hmm.
No one respects him less in that community except the people in that arena who don't respect him anyways. They're never going to respect him.
Yeah.
But it's just like I kept thinking about this over and over again because this was the first movie I watched in doing my research with him. I just kept playing in my head over and over again, him being like, and I'm paraphrasing, but he gets boxed in, he gets stereotyped, he gets pigeonholed into these roles, and he's this goofball, and there's other sides to him that he wants to show. And then I'm watching him be a person, and he's sitting in this giant oversized chair.
Yes. Playing oversized tennis.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I don't think that you know what it is that you actually want.
Yes.
The lightning in the bottle of him getting cut with the light or whatever is the endearing part of him. We tap into that in this, and it's like, oh shoot, like, are you okay? Like, I can't believe you've gotten yourself into this mess. It's Dewey all over again.
He's truly naive through that whole process. He's so desperate for acceptance by that community because of what happened that he's willing to make really poor decisions for himself. That was the saddest part of it. It's just like you're watching a guy who, it's probably not going to work out that well for him, no matter what he does.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, though, by the end of it, he's a pretty damn good wrestler. He had good moves, and he's jacked.
He's a solid worker for his age.
Yeah.
He's as good as you would expect him to be.
I could do that. I think it's really a career redemption story for him personally. It's not going to change anything about what roles he gets, but it makes him feel better about the choices that he made in the early 2000s, or that he agreed to make in the early 2000s. Gives him some type of closure.
So when I look at his career, and I'm glad you said that, because I think of him more of as a producer. The home runs he's hit and the money he's making is off of Cougar Town, and it's off of projects like this.
Cougar Town, he and Courtney produced together with Cat Productions.
Yeah, so early in his career, he knocked it out of the park with some producing roles. And then the back end of it, he's making all the money, and that's why I said it. There's a scene in there where he's like, "Oh, I've been auditioning for 10 years, blah blah blah." You're producing the movies you're claiming you're auditioning for. So let's stop acting like no one's going to hire you to do anything, because you can just produce it. The genius of his career is the fact that he's an elite producer who's made a ton of money, and we're talking about a career redemption and a brilliant documentary.
Mm-hmm.
It's so cool, so crafty.
It's a weird path to take.
The documentary thing pairs really well when you watch the Scream Wreck reboot
in 2022. Yeah.
Or Scream 5, because he dies in that one.
Sure does. Yep.
It's a really clever movie in the way that Scream is clever, and the way the premise of Scream 3 is clever.
I really enjoyed it.
The way the intro to Scream 2 is clever. In that way, there's flaws, but who cares? It's a Scream movie. It's really clever, which is what you're there for. And his death is an homage. Like, it's played really big. I don't want to call it emotional, but it's sad.
Yeah, it's heroic.
Because, like, this is a character that I've
grew up with.
I saw Scream really early. And I've known this character forever, and he never dies. And he's always supposed to die.
Yeah.
So how is he dying now? And it's played really big, and it's, when you say, career redemption with that movie, I feel like that's what Scream 5 was doing. When I look at his career, I just see a person who just doesn't fit. There's no place for him, really. Like, he kind of outstayed his welcome. Like, he's supposed to be in, like, stoner comedies and, and stupid stuff when he's young. And then, he kind of moves on to the next thing.
Or you can be a successful producer who owns multiple bars and restaurants and is just making loads of money away from acting.
Put on your polka dot costume, resurrect Bozo, and have yourself a great time wherever you're out and about. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
I don't knock him. Do your thing. Like, I mean, do what you got to do.
We do have one movie left.
We do have one movie. Yeah, maybe that will change your guys' mind.
That's a good transition. Case, why don't you talk about your review of the storied life of A.J. Fikry, where he plays Lambiaz? I don't know. Tell us.
The storied life of A.J. Fikry, it's the highest fan gap, correct?
Yeah, largest audience gap. Yep.
Yeah, and it makes sense because this movie is an adaptation from a best-selling novel by the same name written by Gabrielle Zevin, and it led to an 88-35 split, which makes perfect sense because I had never heard of this book, but I'm well aware of, like, for example, there was a movie called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior that came out several years ago. I love that book, and I really liked the movie. And that movie had a 76-25 split as well. So I think...
Yeah, so book fans are coming.
Yeah, so the book fans are coming out. It's definitely not my cup of tea. Basically, it's the story about this bookstore owner on an island. His wife has passed away. He's struggling with alcohol and money and all this stuff. And a mother who's struggling in her own right drops her child off at his bookstore and then disappears. And what we later found out is she drowned and died. And the bookstore owner, who's he's a curmudgeon. He's definitely not the parental type. He ends up raising her. And it's a really, really heartwarming story about the relationship between these two. He plays the chief of police on the island. It's actually a refreshing change for him because while he's still playing the really warm-hearted, kind do-gooder, he isn't playing it buffoonish in this role. And in fact, he's actually kind of the centerpiece for like wisdom and like doing the right thing and all this stuff in there. And he's consistently challenging the main characters of like, hey, you know what you need to do here. And so it's actually pretty refreshing. I would say it's probably the third most important role in the movie. I enjoyed this story. I enjoyed him in it. I think this is a really good role for him. We've talked about it, that kind of really warm-hearted, good person, just happy to see you character. As a chief of police who loves reading books, he pulls it off real well. I would say that this movie it's a massive step above like a Hallmark movie, but it's certainly not like an epic movie based on a novel. And so I think it was, what did we say? It was 88-35?
88-50 something, I think.
Or 88-53 maybe?
Yeah.
I'll give it a 70. And I'm giving it a 70 primarily because of his performance.
Redemption arc. Maybe. Potentially.
I had never heard of this movie before. It's not my cup of tea, but I did enjoy him in it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff he did between 2015 and now is movies like this, like that are just not mainstream. But he gets to be like one of the names, and like this one has Christina Hendricks in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood's probably done her dirty in some ways after Mad Men, but
the two young ladies that played Maya, Jordan McIntosh and Blair Brown, are really good.
Yeah,
like they're really good in this movie. So there's a lot of strong performances, and it's clearly well written, right?
Yeah,
I'm just not great with the sappy. Like anytime a movie's intended to be sad to make you cry, I don't love when they weaponize the emotions of a story, but I also don't love that in comedies either. When they make dumb jokes just to try to get the movie going. So it was fine, and it was good because of him.
In 2022, Arquette joins a couple of other Munsons when he jumped into the video game world, where he makes an appearance in the game The Quarry.
The Quarry is a video game that came out in 2022. It's an interactive role-playing horror video game, which is kind of envisioned as the spiritual successor to Until Dawn, which is a game I loved and scared the shit out of me, which starred fellow Munson Rami Malek. Similar to that game, in this game you assume the control of a bunch of teenage camp counselors who must survive their last night at the Quarry, which is a camp in upstate New York, and all of a sudden there's, supernatural creatures and violent locals. Depending on the choices you make, they can die. All 9 playable characters could survive. For me, I only made it to the end with 4, where Until Dawn had players essentially be playable horror movie stereotypes. In this game, it's more modernized, I guess. This game's definitely more cinematic and is funnier for sure than Until Dawn. But when comparing the two, I think Until Dawn is a better actual game. Arquette plays kind of a camp counselor and is great in the role that was clearly written for him. He's earnest and friendly, but like a little off-putting and hard to get a read on, which is really great for a story like this, where it's a spooky camp. You can't play as him as you could Rami Malek and Until Dawn, so I won't spoil the story. But if it sounds something you're interested in, but I can confirm he's a perfect fit for this game, and the game is great.
There's nothing really worth noting after that one. That's, I think, people know. So, Case, let's talk top performances. What do you got? What were you able to find?
You guys, this was actually quite difficult.
Not shocking.
I was on page 3 of my search, but I did find a article on Looper from January 24th, 2022, which is titled David Arquette's Best Movie and TV Roles. And the author writes that, which I don't necessarily endorse this view, but I'll appreciate his opinion. Arquette is a risk taker who makes it look natural. Even when he looks ridiculous with bulging eyes and exaggerated features, it feels right for the character he's portraying. Whether it's the cartoonishly bashful but brave Dewey Riley or the wrestling-obsessed social outcast Gordy, Arquette makes big choices that are always entertaining and unexpectedly natural.
He does have googly eyes. I'll agree with that.
There's 11 roles on this list. 2 of them we mentioned briefly, 5 of them we talked about or reviewed, and 4 of them we didn't bring up at all.
Oh,
Let's just get Scream out of the way.
It's just the one screen.
okay. Give me John's. Did it make an appearance?
John's is not on the list.
Oh, never mind.
Eight-legged freaks.
Eight-Legged Freaks is not on the list.
And it's roles, too, so we're not talking movies here.
Terrible list.
Well, it's the only list.
And it's TV as well. All right, so since it is TV, I don't know, man. This is hard.
And some of them aren't big TV roles either.
Never Been Kissed. This is definitely on that list.
Never Been Kissed is on the list. Rob Geller.
Yep. I felt good about that.
Ready to Rumble. That's on the list because it was mentioned in the intro.
You mentioned it. It better be.
Ready to Rumble is on the list. Gordy Boggs.
What do you got, Sam?
I mean, it's just a crapshoot of bad movies.
I know. All right, My Name is Earl.
My Name is Earl is not on the list.
Oh, boy. We're going to give you like 2 more guesses, and you're just going to have to tell us, Case, because this is the hardest I've ever had, like, picking. All right, Muppets. Give me a Muppets movie.
There are no Muppet movies. There's still 2 on here that we talked about extensively or reviewed.
Oh, Buffy.
Buffy.
Yeah, Buffy.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer is on the list.
Okay.
Still 1 more that we talked about, we reviewed actually.
Wild Bill.
It has to be Wild Bill.
Wild Bill is not on the list.
I think David Arquette wrote this article. I think it's under a pseudonym.
His pseudonym is now Dustin Pinney.
Probably something there. Check the Twitter accounts.
Was it your movie, Case? The Storied Life of whatever?
No.
AJ Fickery. So it's Bone Tomahawk?
Bone Tomahawk is on the list.
It's not his role, though. Like that just doesn't make any sense.
That makes no sense.
That movie for 45 seconds.
Makes no sense.
It's a small role, but important for Arquette, where he demonstrates his unique spin on a character by reminding us just how human he is. This guy put some work into this list, so I'll give him credit there.
The Gray Zone?
Gray Zone is not on the list.
The work was done in all of the optimism that they poured into writing these things, which I respect. I respect that.
Put us out of our misery. What else is on the list?
Malcolm the Stalker in Friends.
Okay.
Randy Mann in Pushing Daisies.
Okay.
Now, the ones we didn't talk about, Greg in Hamlet 2.
Yeah. That's good.
Captain Barnabas, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. George Staub in Riding the Bullets. And one of my favorite shows in preparation for this episode, he played Sheriff Deke in a really interesting episode of Creep Show on AMC. I apologize.
Slim Pickens, baby. That's what that is.
Slim Pickens.
Hey, it's a top list. So everybody knows it's Scream number 1. Everything else is just secondary. So
yeah.
All right. Let's get into the Munson Meter. What we do, we rate every actor on a scale of 0 to 100 based on a variety of factors that could include anything from longevity, pop culture, project choice, their acting range, awards footprint, any other talents they might have, their personal life, comedic chops, box office success, and anything else that matters to us as Munsons. All right, this time we're going to start with Case.
This one's tough, right? Clearly somebody that I really like. I think he is a beautiful human being who's pretty entertaining, pretty interesting. I just don't know that from an acting standpoint, it's tough to compare him to anybody that we've looked at. That being said, here are some important things we've talked about or didn't talk about during this episode. one of the coolest documentaries I've ever seen about an actor. Really cool family and a very interesting beginning, like growing up foundation. Him using the line, "I've got a lot of Carney in me," in a documentary, is really good. Speaks to my heart because I got a lot of Carney in me too. So I can appreciate that game. I think where he's a master is the producing work that he's done in collaboration with other people or on his own. The guy's making a lot of money. And you can tell that by looking at the house that he's living in during the documentary that, we watched. The guy's a WCW champion. We've not had that. We don't have one other performer that we've looked at that's a heavyweight champion. He was the heavyweight champion. It's amazing. We talked about Bozo the Clown and him going, "Hey, you know what? I like Bozo the Clown so much, I'm going to buy all the rights to it, and I'm going to start going to clown school so I can perform as Bozo the Clown." And the other one we didn't talk about was he's a trained Bob Ross painting instructor. And in Scream 5, he taught the cast of Scream 5 how to paint like Bob Ross.
That's right, he did.
All that said, you'll probably notice I didn't bring up any movie roles.
No.
I'm really bad about scoring people too high, going past some of their movie stuff. But on him, I just can't give him the score I want to give him because he doesn't have anything that I can sink my hooks into as an actor. I love everything that he does away from acting. I just couldn't find anything to love about his acting. And so I'm going to give him a 62.
All right. To your point, Case, I look at my list here and I'm trying to do some coding, some themes here for the nerds in the room. Everything here, to your point, for the most part, has nothing to do with his acting chops in his career. Yeah, I like his journey with wrestling. I'm with you every step, pretty much every one of your points. I think it's a shame that the choices that were made in the early 2000s killed his career because who knows what it would have been. But, hindsight's 2020, it is what it is. He's a fighter. He's persevered through some serious health scares. Give him credit there. And whatever shades of dramatic excellence he might have had as a young actor was lost with project choices. To Sam's point earlier, fire your manager as soon as they get you set up with a particular role. In the late 90s, it pigeonholes you, and then you can never get out of that.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of pop culture relevance. I'll give you there. He gets a lot of points in that because people know who David Arquette is. For good or for bad, they know David Arquette. And it doesn't help that his early roles, which are supposed to be more nuanced, are just hard to find. You can't watch them anymore. So, and the Bozo the Clown part. But again, all those things you talked about, if he had a better movie career, I don't know if he does those things because he's busy on sets. So, of course, he's going to do all this random shit because he's not working. So that's going to lead to me giving him one of my lowest scores. I'd have to look. He's probably right there without doubt. I'm going to give him a 53. All right, Sam, you're up. Guess Munson.
I was really surprised to hear all that stuff about him, which I also didn't know. It's very, very impressive. And yeah, the pop culture thing definitely saves him. But ultimately, I mean, it's really hard to take the guy seriously as an actor. On the one hand, he's not like an asshole like a lot of famous actors are. So you kind of wanted to give him some leeway there. But I'm gonna give him a gracious 55.
A gracious 55. I love it. All right, James, what do you got?
I came into this podcast expecting to eviscerate him, but I kind of view him now as an underdog that I'm rooting for after watching that documentary on him. I'll get it out of the way. I don't think he's a very good actor, and I gave him a very low score. But a lot can be said about someone that everyone who meets them doesn't just say that they like him, they say they love him.
Yeah.
He seems like a good guy who became super famous because he was from a famous acting family, was in an instant classic horror movie, and married an A-list celebrity all in a span of a few years. If his last name wasn't Arquette and he never married Courtney Cox, I think he might have had a different career that is looked at maybe in a little bit more positively than it currently is. But that's speculating. He has a genuine sweetness beneath his quirkiness and his bravado that kind of puts like a hold on you. It's an outsized personality that every role he's in is like, it kind of has a reckless energy, and when it works, it's great.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work a lot of times. And so he needs roles that are written like specifically for him, which isn't really acting, so it's like hard to say. It's like, it's really hard to pin down what is best for him. Clearly under all the goofiness is a guy battling severe anxiety. ADHD, which I can relate to, and has issues with substance abuse.
Yeah.
But is a man who cares about his family, loves to have fun, and just happens to be an actor when really he pretty much just wanted to wrestle. All that said, I'm rooting for him, but I gave him a 49.
All right, Aubrey, round us out.
I fall in lockstep with you guys. I like him a lot. The off-the-screen stuff is interesting. The documentary was insightful, endearing. Well, a lot of what I thought to be true about him seems to be true, which was nice to see. He seems, by all accounts, like he's a good person who's trying to figure it out, and he's trying to also recover from what, like, personally would be really tragic to experience, like the heights of fame, and he's living a dream, and then the bottom kind of falls out, and him kind of scrambling around to try to figure that out is something that I find endearing, and I like him, and I root for him, and I want great things for him. I love the wrestling stuff because I love wrestling. I love the wrestling stuff. Like, I kind of poked a little bit at the wrestling fandom thing earlier, but he did stuff that wrestlers don't even do. There's professional wrestlers that are big time wrestlers that didn't do the things that he did.
Yeah.
So, like, he's endeared himself to that community. He worked hard and made something right. And in turn was able to kind of shine the light on wrestling in a very serious way with that documentary, in a very positive way, which is great. And I love that. With my Munson score is never about those things. My Munson score is always about the work. It is. And that's one of the great things I love about this, is that everyone has their own way of going about it. And mine has always been about the work. It's what you showed me. And it's not there. It's just not. There's nothing here that I look at and I'm like, yeah, I'm here for him. Or he did something here that was interesting or brought me back or that I thought about.
Yeah.
Even in movies that, like, I love Eight-Legged Freaks. I love that movie. He can't even penetrate into a way that does something memorable for me in that. And it's just like, it's just not there. And I don't want to beat a dead horse with it. It's great that he's in Scream. It's great that he's able to make this iconic role in that movie. I think the movie would be fine if his character wasn't in it ultimately. I just don't think he's all that good. So for me, he lands where a couple of other people have went. My scores are extreme, and I think my scores can go extreme because it's based on the work, and so it's extreme in that way. So he gets a 50. Nothing lower than a 50 from the teacher.
Okay. That gives David Arquette a 53.8, which puts him in 102nd place, just in front of Chris O'Dowd with a 53.5.
I can't believe Chris O'Dowd is that low.
I know. I think a lot of us would rescore him a little bit differently. Like, I think of, like, I really like the IT Crowd. Liked whatever the show, the semi-autobiographical show. I've enjoyed him in most movies. It's just not won the awards and done those things.
And he was great in Get Shorty.
Oh, he's wonderful in St. Vincent. He deserves better than that, but
he's lower than David Arquette.
Puts him second to last between William Atherton and Chris O'Dowd.
David Arquette, I love you. I love who you are. But I mean, honestly, it feels pretty fair.
I mean, the guy's a Munson. I mean.
He made it. Aubrey, what has he got coming?
5 movies listed on IMDb. 4 that are in production, 1 in development. I feel bad saying this. None of them look interesting. So he's got a TV movie called Hot Pink. It explores the real, knotted, messy, thriving heartbeat of young womanhood through the eyes of a 16-year-old girl named Nina. He plays the father in the story, I think. And the only other person I really have in here that is notable, Sarah Michelle Gellar.
The Buffyverse.
A lot of father roles towards the end of his career here.
He's got something called Mob Cops, where he is the top build. And the plot is under wraps, but that's in post-production. The Perfect Gamble. There's only like a handful of people listed here. The Unholy Trinity. That has Samuel L. Jackson and Pierce Brosnan in it.
Oh, okay.
So there's a chance. I will say that it's a Western, so I'm into it. However, Pierce Brosnan is Samuel L. Jackson. not two people that are, afraid of a dud every now and then.
No.
And then in every Dream Home is something that he's also executive producing that's in development, and I don't know much about. He's got stuff coming.
He's got more stuff than some actors do.
Yeah, he's got 5 things in production and development, so that's not nothing. He's still working, which is great that he's still working. And he's an executive producing, which is also great because he still has his hands in the pies getting things done. He has a movie with Samuel L. Jackson and Pierce Brosnan. That's also not nothing. So, he's still working, which is great. Like, you see actors fall off and they fall out. And he's not there yet. He's still working, which is awesome.
All right, next episode's going to hit July 25th, and we got Jim from Film Rage, our Canadian guest, coming back. He was with us for Owen Wilson. Yep. I'm just going to fire these 5 names at you guys. Quick reaction. Who do you love? Who do you hate? John Michael Higgins, Elizabeth Marvell, Tina Fey, Claire Danes, Léa Seydoux.
Tina Fey.
You want to know what I love? Léa Seydoux.
Léa Seydoux.
Yeah, she's incredible.
Great actress.
She's so beautiful. She's hard to look at. It's ridiculous. Yeah. She's also super talented. Such a good actor.
So talented. There'll be a lot of Wes Anderson films there again.
Claire Danes would be fun.
I don't know much about Elizabeth Marvell, to be completely honest with you, so that's probably the one where I would have the biggest learning curve.
Makes me think of like Captain Marvel.
Marvel. Yeah, it could be Marvel. That tells you as much as I know. John Michael Higgins, we'd laugh a bunch. He's in some bad movies, too. Some really bad movies.
He is.
But Tina Fey, we'd laugh a lot, too, as well. Get to watch some SNL, right, Case?
Mm-hmm.
Lean on you for that.
I'd probably watch some SNL in that case.
Oh, you might. Sam, who would you pick if you had to make a return trip?
Oh, definitely Léa Seydoux.
Yes.
That's a good choice.
Love this guy.
If Jim did decide, which he didn't, what do we think Jim picked if he was here for Owen Wilson last time?
It's hard with such a small sample size. Would he pick another comedy person, or would he go out the box? Because Claire Danes is probably about as far away from those people as you could get, I think.
Are any of them Canadian?
I don't think so. Elizabeth Marvel, maybe.
Maybe he's been spending some time in Quebec.
Well, we'll see. He doesn't decide, though, and neither does Sam. Neither does Case, and I definitely don't decide because the wheel decides, and we'll see what happens.
Allegedly. Is
that what it is? All right, Sam, we've reached the mountaintop, my friend. This is the plug where you get a chance to plug anything you're working on, or wise words, or just, whatever you're feeling in your heart, my friend.
Wise words I don't have. I'm working in a metal theft unit right now, so I'm doing early in the morning to early afternoons, and then helping out with the kid. Life is good, so I'm glad I got to join. Would love to do it again. Definitely picked a good one, so happy to be here, guys. Good to see you.
Thanks for jumping on, man. I'm glad we finally got you back.
Yeah,
glad you can make it. Always enjoy having you on. It's like the spirit of Warren still around when you're able to join us. Well, as we wrap up, you can find us on X, Munsons at Movies. You can catch us on Instagram, Munsons at the Movies. You can email us, munsonsatthemovies@gmail.com. Any final thoughts from David Arquette?
You guys are crazy, man. Y'all are all woohoo and shit.
Munsons out.
All right, let's go. Thank you for the education, gentlemen. We've just received a PhD in stupidity. Doctor, shall we?
I'm here to tell you a story about a man created by God. No, a man created by Hollywood. Not MacGyver, not Vin Diesel, not Stallone, not Schwarzenegger. I'm talking about David Arquette. The man is invincible. He was in Scream 1, Scream 2, Scream 3. If they make a Scream 4, he's coming back as a goddamn cyborg. He was in Ready to Rumble, and he was a WCW champion for 2 weeks. He was an 8-legged freak who repelled giant spiders. Giant spiders, for God's sakes! He was also in C-Spot Mun, but only because he needed the money. And that's why you cannot kill David Arquette! You cannot kill David Arquette! Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to tell you a little bit more about the man. We're going to drop some science on your weak asses. Have you ever seen the movie Titanic? He is nothing like that whatsoever. David Arquette is equal parts adamantium and superfly. He is a trained ninja from the Shinobi Institute of Ninjutsu and has mastered every single one of David Lee Roth's acrobatic jumps. In a sad, sorry world, there's only 2 things you can count on. 1, an up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start. They give you 30 lives on Contran. And number 2 is the UK.